Hey guys, tonight we saddle up for a rough ride into the untamed frontier of the American Wild West. The sky is a brilliant wash of orange and gold, dust clings to your boots, and the scent of horses and sweat hangs in the air. You're standing at the edge of a scrubby trail, sun glaring off your brow, a 10-gallon hat wobbling uncomfortably on your head. The air is hot, dry, and thin, your mouth already feels like it's been stuffed with cotton. And guess what? You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint into the horizon, where heat shimmers like a mirage and nothing moves but a lone vulture circling overhead. You're no cowboy. But here you are, saddling up a restless horse and trying to look confident while your boots still have the price tags on them. The Wild West isn't just about dusty duels and epic vistas. It's grit, hunger, and more ways to die before noon than a video game on hard mode. Your first lesson in survival: nothing is romantic about this landscape. It's harsh, vast, and humming with threats you can't see. You think, how hard can it be to just walk west? Well, you're about 5 minutes in and your thighs already hate the saddle. The leather creaks, the sun scorches your neck, and there's something disturbingly damp inside your boot. Sweat? Or something that crawled in there before you did? Every movie you've ever seen told you the West was about freedom. Wide open spaces. Adventure. They didn't show you the part where your lips crack open from the dry wind, or where every step threatens to snap your ankle on loose rock. Your horse, let's call him Lucky, is not impressed with you. You try to give him a firm heel nudge like you've seen in the movies. He responds by turning his head and sneezing directly in your face. You're already covered in trail dust, and now you've got horse snot dripping down your shirt. Welcome to day one. The sun climbs higher, and you begin to realize why even experienced frontiersmen started early and stopped by mid-afternoon. Heatstroke wasn't a theoretical problem, it was a silent killer. Historians still argue whether dehydration or sun exposure caused more fatalities on the trail. Either way, you're in danger of both. Your canteen is half full of warm water that now tastes like old metal, and you just spilled some trying to take a dramatic sip. A breeze picks up, giving you a moment's relief until it blows grit into your eyes. You blink furiously, nearly falling off Lucky, who's found something more interesting than you, a patch of dying grass. He stops without warning, and you lurch forward, gripping the saddle horn like it's a lifeline. It turns out simply staying on a horse is an accomplishment out here. Actual cowboys grew up in the saddle. You? Your idea of roughing it was losing Wi-Fi for 10 minutes. Now you're balancing on 1,000 pounds of irritated muscle that reacts badly to loud noises, sudden movements, and strangers, which, unfortunately, you are. Then there's the issue of directions. You pull out a hand-drawn map because GPS won't be invented for another century and a half and squint at the squiggles. Is that a river bend? Or someone's coffee stain? You realize quickly that head west until you see the big rock shaped like a buffalo is not a great navigational plan, especially when every rock starts to look like a buffalo after a few hours in the sun. Still, you press on. That's what pioneers did, right? They pressed on, kept going, pushed through the pain. But then again, those same pioneers buried entire families along the trail. Little wooden crosses lined roads to nowhere. And most of them had more experience than you do. You're starting to notice the silence. It's not peaceful. It's eerie. There are no chirping birds, no buzzing insects, just the sound of your horse's hooves and your own heartbeat pounding in your ears. Your ears prick up at every distant sound. Is that a coyote? A rattlesnake? Or just your nerves playing tricks? Here's a fun little fact: many frontiersmen, hardened as they were, carried tiny good luck charms, rabbit's feet, carved wooden talismans, even coins rubbed thin by years of wishing. Not because they were superstitious. Well, okay, some were. But mostly because when everything out here wants to kill you, you need something, anything, to believe might keep you alive. You check the horizon again. Still nothing. No town, no trail, no friendly wagon full of snacks and sunscreen. Just more dust, more rocks, more dry wind that leaves your lips bleeding. And then, because the West is nothing if not ironic, you spot your first skull. Just lying there, bleached by the sun. A cow? A horse? Maybe someone else who thought this would be a fun adventure. You swallow. Your mouth is bone dry. Your stomach growls too. It's only midday, but it feels like you've lived a full week. Back in the real world, you'd be browsing lunch options or ordering bubble tea. Here, your only menu item is hope you remembered to pack jerky. Spoiler alert, you didn't. You pat your saddlebag. Inside, One half-melted candy bar, 2 dusty crackers, and a completely useless multi-tool you bought from a trendy outdoor store. That's right, you came to the frontier with a $90 survival gadget and no idea how to use it. And you know what's even worse? There's no going back. The trail behind you is just as empty as the one ahead. You're already too far in to give up. So you nudge Lucky onward, trying to ignore the sweat in your eyes, the ache in your legs, and the growing suspicion that your adventure has just begun and it's not going to be the romantic, windswept story you imagined. Welcome to the Wild West. The sun's a little higher now, so are your regrets. Your neck is redder than a boiled lobster, your skin feels like it's being roasted over a slow flame, and you've officially begun the transition from eager adventurer to human jerky. You shift in your saddle, trying to find a position that doesn't make your thighs scream. No luck. Every inch of leather is now either blistering hot or soaked through with your sweat. You knew it would be hot, sure, but this is a whole different beast. The sun isn't just bright out here. It rules the sky like a tyrant, showing no mercy. You try tying a bandana around your neck for shade. It soaks through in minutes. Your hat? Mostly decorative. Turns out those wide brims were meant to keep sun off your face, but you bought the wrong size and it keeps sliding down, blocking your vision. And then you hear it. That dry, almost whispering sound in the sand behind you. You stop Lucky, who seems equally interested in this new sound. He stomps a hoof and snorts, ears swiveling. A snake. It's coiled half under a rock, eyeing you like you're the appetizer on its lunch menu. It's not huge, maybe 3 feet long, but its tail is vibrating with the kind of enthusiasm that says back off or bleed. Rattlesnakes are no joke. One bite and you're done. No hospitals. No anti-venom. Just a feverish, painful spiral into unconsciousness and a shallow grave you'll probably have to dig yourself. Historians still argue whether more settlers died from snake bites or misdiagnosed infections. Either way, it's a grim tie. You slowly back Lucky away, keeping your eyes on the rattler like it owes you money. It doesn't strike, thankfully. Probably because you're sweating so much you no longer resemble prey. But the message is clear. Every rock, every log, every shady patch might be hiding something that can end you. And there are so many rocks. You start to develop a habit, leaning forward in the saddle to scan the trail 10 feet ahead before letting Lucky take the next step. It's slow, tedious, and doesn't help your sore backside, but at least it lowers the odds of getting bitten or breaking an ankle in a hole some prairie dog left as a booby trap. By late morning, the sun is directly overhead. You can feel it pulling the moisture from your body like a vacuum. You're drinking from your canteen sparingly, it's the only water you have, and there's no guarantee of more. But every sip is warm, metallic, and makes your stomach turn. So you drink slower, trying to pretend it's just herbal tea. The worst herbal tea ever brewed. Dehydration doesn't hit like a punch. It sneaks up. First your mouth goes dry. Then your head starts to buzz, like there's a swarm of flies somewhere behind your eyes. Your skin gets tight. Your lips crack. You feel woozy, like you're walking through hot jello. You look at the horizon and it warps, melts, then reforms again like some kind of slow nightmare. This is the part where you stop sweating, which feels like relief until you realize that's your body giving up on temperature regulation. That's not a win. That's an emergency. You scan for shade. There's nothing but a dead tree with all the cooling power of a slightly damp umbrella. Still, you make for it. Slide off Lucky, land hard on your feet, and immediately regret both decisions. Your knees wobble. You lean against the trunk and practically collapse into the dirt, panting. Lucky just stares at you, chewing thoughtfully. He seems fine. Of course he is. Horses evolved out here. You? You evolved in air conditioning. A breeze drifts past. You're grateful for the movement of air until it carries something else with it. A smell. Rot. Faint, but unmistakable. You peer into the brush and there it is, a bloated, half-buried carcass. Could be a deer. Could be something else. Either way, it's got company buzzing, crawling company. And now you're thinking, if I don't find water soon, that's gonna be me. Time for decisions. Push forward or backtrack. You don't remember passing a stream. And the map, well, we covered the map. Useless. You decide to press on. The next hour is a blur. You remount Lucky, who reluctantly carries you along a barely there trail. The sun begins its slow crawl downward, but there's no relief. The air is thick with heat and silence. Your head lolls. Your hands shake. Then you see it. A glint. Not gold. Not a miracle. But water. A shallow, muddy creek snakes its way between 2 hills. You dismount clumsily and practically fall to your knees at the edge. You lean in, about to drink, and then stop. Because this water smells wrong. You remember reading something about this. Don't drink standing water. Filter or boil everything. You stare at the murky surface and realize those aren't just bits of mud floating in it. They're things. Shapes. Little wiggling things. Bacteria, maybe? Or parasites. Here's a quirky historical tidbit. Some frontier towns issued water-boiling advisories before that was even a concept, usually right after a third of the town caught dysentery. You curse your modern brain for being so educated. A dumber version of you would just drink and be done with it. But now you know enough to be afraid and not enough to fix the problem. So you sip the tiniest amount. Swish it. Spit it out. Then drink a little anyway because your body's screaming louder than your fear. It tastes like mud and regret. The sun is finally starting to lower. Long shadows stretch across the land. Lucky nibbles dry grass nearby, occasionally swishing his tail in irritation. You've got half a canteen left, a belly full of questionable creek water, and a pounding headache. And you're still not even close to shelter. It's barely past noon on your first day. And already you've been roasted, stalked, bitten, almost bitten, and reduced to drinking parasite punch. You close your eyes and take a deep breath, hoping to find some inner calm. Instead, you inhale a bug. You cough, gag, and sputter like you've just inhaled a spark plug. The bug, some kind of winged demon disguised as a gnat, flaps pathetically against your throat before finally sliding down. You sit there, stunned, wondering if that counts as protein. Probably. Maybe you should celebrate. Look at you already adapting. But then again, real frontier folks didn't choke on insects every few hours. Or maybe they did and just didn't write home about it. You're sticky, dizzy, and now a little humiliated. Welcome to the Wild West, where the buffet is bugs, the drinks are dirty, and the accommodations include shade under dying trees. The shadows are stretching now, the sun dipping lower. You'd think this would be a relief, but here's the twist: nights out here get cold. Really cold. All the dry desert heat vanishes fast once the sun goes down, and suddenly you're the only warm thing in a world made of sand and silence. And you? You didn't pack a blanket. Or a coat. Or anything other than your trendy canvas jacket and a long-sleeve tee that says Yosemite vibes. That's not going to cut it. You sigh, mount Lucky again, and start moving. There's a rocky ridge up ahead, and something about it feels right. Like it might give you a little protection from the wind and maybe even a better view of what's ahead. So you guide Lucky toward it, trying to ignore the ominous caw of a crow overhead. You're pretty sure that's not a good sign. As you climb, the landscape changes. Less brush, more boulders. You can see farther now, and the view is stunning. Golden light spills over the land like melted butter, painting the rocks in long, dramatic shadows. This is the West as postcards promised. But beneath the beauty, your instincts still whisper, find shelter now. You find a rocky overhang, just high enough for you to duck under. Not a cave, exactly, but it'll block the wind. Lucky finds a flat spot nearby to rest. He lies down, which feels oddly unsettling, like even he knows you're done for the day. You gather dry grass, twigs, and whatever scrub you can find. You don't have matches. Of course not. You packed a mini solar charger for your phone instead. Useful. Not. Still, you try the old rub two sticks together thing. It's going badly. The sticks squeak, your palms blister, and your frustration mounts with every failed attempt. You sit back, panting, and mutter something your ASMR voice would never repeat. Here's a quirky fact: despite what movies suggest, most cowboys didn't start fires by rubbing sticks. They used flint, steel, or best of all, pre-lit coals from their last stop. You, on the other hand, have nothing but twigs and pride. And both are failing you. Eventually, you give up. The light is almost gone now, the sky going purple, then dark blue. The first stars blink above, distant and cool, and a breeze kicks in. Not gentle. Sharp. You wrap your arms around yourself and huddle deeper under the overhang. And then, the sounds start. The day might be dangerous, but the night is where the real fear kicks in. You hear a rustle. Could be a rat. Could be a snake. Could be something bigger. The West isn't just home to coyotes. There are bobcats, wolves, even mountain lions in some places. And if you're lucky, all three. Historians still argue whether large predators were more of a threat than humans during westward expansion. Some say wild animals caused panic. Others believe it was always your fellow man you should fear. Either way, you grip the nearest rock like it's a weapon. It's not much, but it's heavy. That counts for something, right? Then there's the sky. Beautiful, yes, but overwhelmingly vast. Out here, the stars feel like they're pressing down on you. No streetlights, no noise, no distractions, just infinity above and you, trying not to freeze to death with a belly full of warm bacteria. You start to shiver. Not just because it's cold, though it definitely is, but because it's setting in, you're alone. Really alone. Every sound matters. Every gust of wind feels like a whisper. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howls. It's high, sad, and far too close for comfort. You clutch your knees to your chest. Try to think of warm things, blankets, fireplaces, ramen. Anything to get your mind off the fact that your teeth are now audibly clicking. Then something even worse, silence. Total silence. The kind that presses against your ears like the world's holding its breath. You stare out into the dark, heart hammering. Every inch of your body is screaming stay awake, but exhaustion is winning. You doze off for minutes at a time, jerking awake at the faintest noise. The rock under your legs digs into your muscles. Your lips are cracked. And now you're slightly nauseous. Could be the bad water. Could be fear. You try humming a tune to calm yourself. It's off-key, quiet, but somehow grounding. That little melody, however broken, feels like the only familiar thing left. And maybe that's the secret to why anyone survived out here at all. They found something, anything to hold onto. A song, a story, a stubborn streak of hope. But you're not feeling particularly hopeful. You just want dawn to come. You want that sun to rise, even if it means another day of blistering heat and bug snacks. At least in the light, the world feels slightly less haunted. Eventually, your head nods. Sleep sneaks in, rough and fitful. You dream of running water and cold lemonade. Then of wolves. Then of being late to high school math class for some reason. When your eyes blink open again, the sky is paler, the stars fading. The horizon is just starting to glow. You made it. You survived the night. Somehow. But as you sit up, body sore and brain foggy, you realize something worse than the cold has happened. Lucky is gone. You scramble to your feet so fast your head spins. The world tilts, your vision narrows, and for one very disorienting moment, you think you might faint. You grip the edge of the rock overhang for balance, blinking against the harsh new sunlight. It's barely dawn, but it already stings your dry eyes like lemon juice on a paper cut. No hoofprints. No neigh. No tail swish. Lucky is just gone. You shout his name, a little hoarse, a lot desperate. Nothing. Just the echo bouncing off distant rocks and a suspiciously disinterested lizard doing push-ups on a warm stone like he's mocking your suffering. Now you're on foot, which in the Wild West is the same as wearing a sign that says "Eat me" in Coyote. You check your canteen, less than a quarter full. Your pack, mostly empty since it was tied to Lucky's saddle. Your pride, rapidly eroding. You pick a direction based more on gut feeling than logic and start walking. It's slow. The sun's already heating up the ground beneath your boots and your socks are, well, let's say they've started a committed relationship with your blisters. You're moving, but everything hurts. Here's a solid historical fact to keep in mind. Pioneers didn't just love their horses, they depended on them for survival. Losing your horse was considered worse than losing your rifle. At least with a rifle, you could still eat. Without a horse, your travel radius dropped from miles to maybe a few painful feet before sundown. Historians still argue whether more settlers died from exposure after losing their horse or from trying to chase it down and dying along the way. Either way, your odds? Not great. The terrain shifts under your boots. Dry scrub becomes loose gravel, which turns to gritty sand that makes each step feel like a struggle against quicksand. Your legs burn. Your lips are starting to bleed. You'd cry if you weren't so dehydrated. Then you see it. Not Lucky, sadly, but something else. Smoke. Thin, curling tendrils rising in the distance, maybe over a low hill or just beyond a dry ravine. It could mean people. It could also mean a fire about to consume the only shade for miles. But at this point, you'll take the risk. You limp toward it, doing that awkward shuffle walk people use when they're trying not to disturb a bear or maybe trying not to cry. As you crest the hill, you spot the source. A camp. More specifically, a campfire, burning low, surrounded by a scattering of bedrolls, gear, and one, maybe two figures. You duck down instinctively, crouching behind a rock like you're suddenly in a Western standoff movie. Because here's the thing, strangers out here aren't necessarily good news. In fact, most of the time, they're the opposite. The Wild West wasn't just cowboys and cattle. It was full of drifters, claim jumpers, and outlaws playing settler cosplay. There was no Yelp, no police on speed dial, and definitely no accountability. People made their own rules and their own graves. You inch a little closer. The figures look rough. Dusty hats, long coats, one of them sharpening a knife with theatrical flair. You can't tell if they're lawmen or bandits or worse, the kind who think lawman and bandit mean the same thing. Do you call out? Do you hide? Do you hope they have water and not an itchy trigger finger? Ultimately, your body makes the decision for you because your foot catches a loose rock, you stumble, and suddenly every eye in the camp turns toward you. Oh no. The silence is immediate, total. Then one of them stands. Not quickly. Slowly. Deliberately. Like someone who's been through this dance before. You lost, the man says, voice gravelly enough to have its own sediment layer. You stand up slowly, arms half raised. Yeah. Lost my horse. Haven't eaten. Water's almost gone. I saw the smoke. They stare at you like you're an alien. A very dehydrated, sunburned alien in bad boots. Eventually, the taller one nods toward the fire. Sit. Don't touch nothing. You do. Because you're not an idiot. Or at least, not a reckless idiot. You sit carefully on a log, hands still visible, and try not to look at the knife. They toss you a canteen. You sniff it first. Smells okay. Tastes metallic, but not deadly. Then they hand you a tin plate with something. Beans? Meat? Both? You shovel it down like a raccoon in a dumpster. Here's your quirky tidbit of the day. Many Wild West meals were made from son-of-a-gun stew, a delightful mix of mystery meat, beans, and whatever else could be scrounged. This version tastes a little better, but you're too tired to care either way. As the food hits your stomach, your brain starts to reboot. You try to think of what to say. Ask for directions? Beg to join them? Offer to work? Pretend you're secretly the governor's cousin? But before you can speak, the man with the knife looks you over. Out here alone? He asks. You nod. Had a horse. Now I don't. He grunts. Lucky? You blink. What? The horse. That his name. Your stomach drops. Yes, you say slowly. How'd you know? He points behind the camp where a rope is tied between two trees. And standing there, as smug and fed as ever, is Lucky. That traitorous, oat-hogging, scenery-chewing beast. Your heart leaps. Relief washes over you so fast it almost knocks you down. You actually laugh, which surprises everyone, including yourself. But the man doesn't smile. He wandered in before dawn. We figured he'd been ridden but didn't see anyone. Almost traded him off to a wagon train passing by. You freeze. You didn't though, right? He shrugs. Didn't get a good price. And somehow that's funnier than it should be. The sun is higher now. You've eaten. You've drunk. You've found Lucky. You're alive barely, but it's a start. Just don't get comfortable. Because the next question these strangers ask could decide if you get to leave this camp or if they just inherited a free horse after all. You sit there, the tin plate now empty except for a smear of grease that probably doesn't qualify as edible residue, trying to look casual. The warmth of the fire, the surge of calories, and the fact that Lucky didn't get sold to a circus wagon are working together to lull you into a dangerous state of hope. But then the shorter man speaks. He's got one eye that doesn't quite line up with the other, and a voice that suggests he gargles gravel each morning. So what brings a fancy shirt nobody like you out here alone? He asks, not unkindly but not kindly either. There's no good answer. You could say a video idea gone wrong, but they wouldn't get it. You could say adventure, but that might get you laughed out of the fire pit or shot, depending on their mood. Instead, you go with the simplest version of the truth. I got separated from my group. Was trying to make it to the next town over, but the map didn't exactly come with labels. The two men exchange a look. The kind of look that says, this one's gonna die by breakfast. They don't laugh. They don't threaten. They just stare. And it's almost worse than anything else. You're lucky we ain't the kill and loot type, the taller one says eventually, throwing a scrap of jerky to a wiry dog sitting nearby. But we ain't a charity either. You want water and a horse? You work. You nod quickly. Too quickly. Sure, absolutely. What do you need? And with that, you are hired. Or conscripted. Or volunteered, depending on how you want to phrase it. Your first job? Cleaning up their gear. Which sounds fine until you realize that gear includes their boots, bedrolls, 2 rifles, a saddlebag full of who knows what, and a cookpot that looks like it survived 3 separate explosions. You scrub with sand and your shirt sleeve because that's all you've got. You scrape dried food off the pan using a horseshoe nail. You try not to gag when one of the boots squishes for a reason you'd rather not contemplate. Here's a mainstream historical fact for you. Cowboys, outlaws, scouts, most of them had to do this kind of grunt work constantly. Hygiene wasn't optional even if it was laughably limited. Dirty gear could mean infected wounds, spoiled food, or just attracting the wrong kind of attention like, say, wolves. Or humans with poor decision-making skills and good aim. Historians still argue whether the constant cleaning was born from necessity or just another way to keep bored, angry men from turning on each other. Either way, it's how you're spending your morning now. Hours pass. The sun climbs. The men mostly ignore you except for the occasional grunt or sarcastic comment. You start feeling like a background character in someone else's western, nameless, thirsty, probably dead by Act 2. Finally, you're allowed to sit again. They toss you a piece of jerky that tastes like salted rubber and tell you to drink slow because water doesn't come easy out here. You try asking about their names, where they're headed, what town might be nearby, but they deflect every question like seasoned professionals. You do manage to piece together that one of them is called Red, ironic since his beard is gray and the other is just Bo. Bo's knife is always visible. Red's eyes never leave you. So, friendly. Eventually, Bo asks, you any good with a rope? You shake your head. Not unless it's on a hoodie. He snorts. Figures. Still, they decide to let you ride out with them. Temporarily. Until we hit town, Red says, though which town, or how far, is still left to mystery. So now you're back on Lucky, who, by the way, looks like he just woke up from a spa treatment and trailing behind two strangers who may or may not decide you're more valuable as a distraction than a travel companion. The landscape rolls out in waves of gold and dust. Mesquite trees claw the sky like arthritic hands. Lizards dart across the path. Somewhere, far off, you hear a hawk cry. It's gorgeous. It's wild. It's unforgiving. And you're starting to realize that survival isn't about being tough, it's about being tolerated. After a few miles, the group stops for a break. Red checks a small map that looks older than sin. Bo lights a hand-rolled cigarette. You just try not to fall off your horse. Should be another day or two, Red mutters. If we don't hit trouble. Ha! Trouble feels like it's already hitting you like a traveling punchline. Here's your fringe tidbit for the day. Some frontier travelers believed that chewing raw coffee beans kept you alert on long rides. Others swore by whiskey-soaked bullets for luck. You, on the other hand, have chapstick and breath mints. Might as well be carrying cursed dice. You camp again that night in a dry arroyo. The air is crisp. Coyotes yip in the distance. You're given a tiny share of dinner, some kind of stew that might have included squirrel and a thin blanket. You curl up next to Lucky, who smells like hay and betrayal. As you drift into another restless sleep, you start thinking about how different this is from every Wild West fantasy you've ever seen. No bar fights with charming rogues. No saloons with ragtime piano. No shiny sheriff badge handed to you because you helped stop a bank robbery. Just dust. Cold. Strange men. Hunger. And the nagging realization that if Red and Bo ever do decide they don't need you anymore, there's nothing stopping them from leaving you out here to become someone's campfire story. Still, you're alive. And for now, that's something. Barely. You wake up to the sound of coughing. Not your own, thankfully, though your throat feels like it's been scrubbed with tumbleweed, but Bo's. A harsh, wet hacking that sounds more like a saw catching on bone than anything human. You blink, disoriented, as the pre-dawn cold grips your spine. Your breath fogs in the air. Red's already up, stoking the fire with slow, practiced movements. He doesn't even glance at Bo, who spits into the dust with a sound that makes your stomach curl. No, good morning. No, sleep well. Just another day in the Wild West. You roll up your blanket, still damp with your own sweat and breath, and check Lucky, who's quietly munching on something that might be weeds or might be your shirt. Either way, you let it go. At least he didn't run again. For now, you're sticking together. Red nods toward the trail. Move out soon. We're a half day from Dry Rock. You pick up. A town. Civilization. The sweet promise of bathwater and walls. Maybe even pie. Red sees the hope flicker in your eyes and douses it immediately. Don't count on much. It's more dust than anything else. And he's right. You arrive at Dry Rock before noon and it lives up to the name. If there's ever been a less welcoming place, you can't think of it. The town consists of 6 buildings, each tilting in a different direction like drunken chess pieces. 1 saloon, 1 general store, a leaning church, and a few homes that look abandoned even with smoke curling out of their chimneys. No paved roads. No welcome signs. No lawman standing proud on the boardwalk with a gold badge and a handlebar mustache. Just a buzzard perched on a hitching post, eyeing you like you're pre-seasoned. You slide off Lucky, legs jelly-like, and follow Bo and Red into the saloon. The moment you walk in, everything stops. Conversation dies. Cards hit the table in slow motion. A man stops mid-swig and ends up pouring whiskey on his own boot. All eyes land on you. Out here, new faces aren't common. And unarmed ones are even rarer. Red doesn't flinch. He strolls up to the bar, nods to the barkeep, a leathery woman who looks like she wrestled a cougar once and won, and orders something called coffee. Bo just grunts and sits. You try to stand still. Casual. Non-threatening. Invisible. You fail at all 3. The barkeep eyes you. That yours? She asks, jerking her chin toward the window. You follow her gaze to Lucky, who's somehow already made himself at home among the other horses. You nod. Yeah. That's mine. She pours a steaming black liquid into a cracked mug and hands it to you. It smells like road tar and revenge. You sip, instantly regret it. But you don't stop. You need this. Every bitter molecule. As you sit, you pick up the conversation again. It's a low murmur but distinct. People here aren't just gossiping. They're measuring you, trying to decide if you're a threat, a target, or just a waste of oxygen. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Western towns were often run more by custom and suspicion than actual law. Sheriffs, when they existed, were underpaid and usually overwhelmed. Justice was a DIY affair. Everyone had a gun, and the quietest person in the room was often the most dangerous. Historians still argue whether these small settlements were more democratic than dangerous little pockets of community justice or simply powder kegs wrapped in wood planks and paranoia. Bo leans toward you. Keep your mouth shut here. Someone calls you a cheat, don't argue. Don't look at wives. Don't mention gold. You blink. What if I don't? You swallow the rest of your coffee, feeling it sear your throat all the way down, and follow Bo out into the dusty street. Red is already talking to a wiry man with a clipboard. You catch phrases like supply run, Northridge, and bandits. You keep your distance, but not too much. If they decide to ditch you here, you're toast. Eventually, Red calls you over. You're coming with. With where? Helping run freight back to a ranch up north. We're paid in beans and ammo. You want to cut, you pull weight. You hesitate. Not because you don't want to work, but because north? Freight? Ranch? Your legs scream no. Your stomach, still gurgling from that coffee tar, screams no. But your survival instinct shrugs and says, could be worse. You nod. The wiry man grins. New hand, huh? Hope you shoot better than you smell. Charming. You're given a burlap sack filled with grain to carry, which weighs roughly as much as your dignity. Your new job? Hauling it to a rickety wagon with one broken wheel and two mules that look like they've made peace with death. The rest of the afternoon is hard, dirty work. Sweat pours down your back. You're covered in dust. A splinter burrows into your palm like it's house shopping. You stub your toe on a rock and nearly scream. But the weirdest part? You don't die. Not yet. Here's your quirky tidbit of the day. Some frontier folk swore that putting a rusty nail in your boot would ward off snake bites. Others believed wearing a red kerchief kept bandits away. You try either at this point. Maybe both. As night falls again, you're allowed to eat with the crew. Salt pork, dry biscuits, and a sort of stew that smells like regret. You sit on the wagon's wheel, staring up at a sky so full of stars it almost doesn't seem real. No light pollution. No planes. Just endless glitter and quiet. It's peaceful. And terrifying. Because you know that out here, one mistake, one wrong glance, one misunderstood word could end everything. Tomorrow, you ride with them to the ranch. Another leg of your accidental journey. Another test of whether someone like you, dropped from the modern world into this dusty nightmare, can really make it through. But for now, you rest. Tomorrow will bring fresh aches and maybe fresh danger. And probably more beans. You wake before dawn, not because you're well rested, far from it, but because someone is shouting. At first, you think it's a dream. Then you hear the mules braying in distress and the distinct clatter of boots on packed dirt. You scramble upright, heart racing, unsure whether you're being attacked or just late for something. Turns out it's both. Red is already saddled up. Bo's shoving supplies into a sack. The wiry man from yesterday, now wearing a rifle like a scarf, is muttering curses at the sky. We're leaving now, Bo growls, barely glancing at you. That freight wagon? We ain't taking it. Too slow. Bandits hit a camp up north last night. Burned it. You don't need convincing. The thought of being anywhere near burned it territory gets you moving at a record pace. You scramble onto Lucky's back without bothering to check your bedroll, your dignity, or whether your socks match, which they don't, but it's not like the tumbleweeds care. As you ride out of Dry Rock, the sun is just starting to peel over the horizon. It paints the desert in layers of copper and gold, turning the jagged cliffs and brittle trees into something almost magical. Almost, because now you're being chased by the threat of real, actual outlaws. Not the cinematic kind who drink whiskey and wink at saloon girls, but the kind who kill without warning, ride without names, and vanish like smoke. Here's a mainstream historical fact to keep you grounded. By the 1870s, banditry wasn't just a nuisance in the West, it was practically an industry. Stagecoach robberies, train holdups, cattle raids. Some towns saw more outlaws than lawmen in a given week. The Pinkerton Detective Agency even became infamous for hunting them down like rabid dogs. Historians still argue whether these outlaws were criminals, folk heroes, or just desperate men in a lawless land. The truth? Probably a bit of all three. You and your crew, and let's use that term generously, ride hard into the hills. The air thins. The temperature climbs. Dust cakes your mouth and eyes. Your legs ache from gripping Lucky's sides. And Lucky, bless him, does his best to ignore your novice handling and not throw you into a canyon. The terrain gets rough. Brush chokes the trail. Rocks jut out like the West is actively trying to knock your teeth out. Red leads, Bo flanks the rear, and you cling to the middle like a nervous burrito. Eventually, you reach a ridge that overlooks a dry basin, scattered with bleached animal bones and the remnants of old campfires. The others slow down, eyes scanning the landscape with a quiet focus that unnerves you. Then you see it. Smoke. Thin, curling, sinister. Maybe a mile off. Bo mutters, that's where it happened. Last night. You barely breathe. It's the closest you've come to real danger so far. Not just the theoretical threat of dying from thirst or misreading someone's mood, but evidence. Someone burned a camp. Someone sent this whole freight plan into chaos. Someone might still be down there. Red lifts his binoculars. Another fun fact, even though they seem modern, binoculars did exist in the 1800s, though expensive and often bulky. Soldiers and scouts carried them. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some cowboys believed looking too long through binoculars cursed your eyes with ghost traces, a kind of lingering hallucination. You'd believe it watching Red's face as he lowers them. Too quiet, he says. No movement. Either they cleared out or they're waiting. There's a pause. Heavy and long. Even Lucky shifts uneasily. Then Red turns his horse sharply. We ride wide. Take the long way. Safer. And just like that, you're back in the saddle, skirting the basin in a wide arc that adds hours to your day but probably saves your skin. The sun rises higher. Sweat rolls down your back in rivers. Your lips crack from the dry wind. You drink slowly because even though you're dying for a full gulp, you know your water is rationed. Every drop counts. Around midday, you stop at a shaded grove of cottonwoods. Red checks the map. Bo disappears behind a rock with a shovel. You collapse onto the ground like a noodle and try not to cry. Almost there, Red mutters. Couple more hours. You nod, eyes half shut, wondering if almost has a different meaning in cowboy speak. It's at this point that Bo returns and tosses something at you. You flinch, then realize it's a dried apple. Wrinkled. Hard. But sweet. And honestly, it tastes like salvation. You chew slowly. Watch the sky. A hawk circles overhead. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes laugh like drunks. It's peaceful in a very I might die any second kind of way. After a short rest, you're off again, this time down a canyon trail so narrow Lucky has to sidestep in places. You try not to look at the drop-off to your left, or the rocks looming on your right, or the fact that every noise sounds like it could be a person or a mountain lion. Did you know cougars still roam this area today? They roamed it back then too. Quiet. Fast. Unpredictable. Cowboys feared them almost as much as bandits because at least bandits had a schedule. By the time the ranch comes into view, little more than a cluster of low buildings behind a wooden fence, you feel like you've aged 5 years. Your thighs are jelly. Your eyes sting. Your hands are blistered from gripping the reins. But you're here. You made it. And somehow, miraculously, Red and Bo don't ditch you at the gate. They ride in, and so do you. The ranch is quiet. A few hands look up, curious. One kid waves. You don't wave back. Not because you're rude, but because you're not sure your arm can physically do that anymore. You dismount like a sack of flour tipping off a shelf. The foreman, a broad, sunburned man with a scar across his chin, walks over and eyes you up and down. This one yours? He asks Red. Red smirks. Temporary. The foreman nods. We could use a temporary. Which is how you find yourself roped into the next phase of your Wild West saga, ranch labor. No one tells you what to do. They just hand you a pitchfork and point at a pile of hay. And honestly, you've had worse days. By now, your hands are stiff, your back feels like it's fused into one long scream, and your clothes smell like they were invented to offend noses. But you made it to the ranch. And you're not dead. Which in the Wild West basically counts as thriving. Your first official day as a ranch hand begins before dawn because apparently the sun is lazy compared to cowboys. You're dragged from a dream about air conditioning by a tin bell that clangs like a church alarm. Someone kicks open your bunkhouse door. It's not a good morning. It's just morning, and no one's happy about it. Red's already up, chewing on something that might be jerky or might be a belt. Bo's gone, probably doing something mysterious and vaguely illegal. You shuffle outside and get your first good look at where you'll be slaving the next few days. A dry, sun-scorched sprawl of fences, cattle, mud, and angry-looking horses. Oh, and cow pies. Everywhere. Like the land itself is angry and leaving you little poop-based hate notes. Grab a shovel, someone grunts. No names. No introductions. No warm breakfast or even the luxury of blinking more than twice. Just a shovel, a wheelbarrow, and a pungent corner of the world reserved for cleaning out stalls. And that's how your day begins, knee-deep in a blend of manure, straw, and despair. Here's your mainstream historical fact: cattle ranching exploded after the Civil War, especially in states like Texas. Cowboys drove herds across hundreds of miles on trails like the Chisholm and the Goodnight Loving to reach railheads and markets. Most cowboys weren't white either. Historians still argue whether nearly a third or more were black, Mexican, or Native American, though Hollywood didn't exactly preserve that part. So no, they didn't all look like John Wayne. And none of them smelled like soap. Speaking of smells, you've now developed a sort of immunity. At first, the stink from the stalls is like a slap. But within an hour, your brain gives up and your nose just shuts off. Survival instincts, probably. If it didn't, you'd walk straight into a cactus to escape. Mid-morning, you're assigned to help with the cattle. Move them from pen to chute, says a man whose face looks like it's been carved from driftwood. You nod like you know what that means. You don't. Turns out it means walking behind a group of stubborn, half-ton beef slabs and trying to convince them, gently without being gored, to file into a wooden chute where they can be branded, vaccinated, or checked. You learn quickly that cattle do not respond to reason, threats, or interpretive dance. They respond to noise, movement, and the occasional poke with a stick, which, let's be honest, you'd respond to too. At one point, a longhorn turns and stares you down. You freeze. It takes a slow step toward you. You consider running. You consider dying. Red yells, "Wave your hat." You don't have a hat. You wave your hand instead like a confused traffic cop. Miraculously, the steer turns and plods away. You collapse against a fence post, trying not to scream into your boots. Here's a quirky tidbit: some ranchers swore by playing music for their cattle. Fiddle tunes, mostly. They believed it calmed the herd, especially during storms. You'd give anything for a fiddle right now. Or headphones. Or a portal home. Lunch is served outdoors, under a patchy bit of shade. Salt pork again. Beans. A tin cup of water so warm it might as well be soup. But you eat every bite like a prisoner grateful for crumbs. Because you are. One of the ranch hands, a woman with sun-leathered skin and braids, sits beside you. "New?" she asks. You nod. "You hold up okay?" "I haven't been kicked yet," you say. She laughs a dry, amused cackle. "Give it time." Her name's Clara. She's been working ranches since she was 10. Used to ride relay for the mail. Claims she once punched a rattlesnake. You believe her. Her hands look like they've been through 5 wars and a wood chipper. "People think cowboys are all shootouts and saloons," she says. "But it's mostly this. Dirt. Sweat. Waiting to die of sunstroke." You nod. Truer words have never been mumbled through a mouthful of beans. After lunch, it's branding time. You're not ready. They heat the irons in a forge. The metal glows a hot orange. The smell of singed hair and seared hide hits you like a punch. The cattle bellow in protest, legs kicking, eyes wild. You're just holding the gate, trying not to puke. Historians still argue whether branding was more about property rights or psychological intimidation. Sure, it marked ownership, but it also showed who was in control. A ranch's brand was like a flag, and stealing cattle was war. Rustlers could be hanged on the spot if caught. So when someone asks if you want to try branding, you politely respond, "I would rather eat my own boots." They laugh, then hand you a branding iron anyway. With red guiding you, you press it to the hide. There's a sizzle, a jerking twitch. The awful smell hits again. You let go and stumble back. Red nods. You didn't faint. That's something. That night, after scraping off as much dirt and cow-related gunk as you can, you crawl into your bunk. The straw mattress feels like heaven. Your muscles are trembling, your fingers won't uncurl, and your neck feels like it's aged 10 years. But you're still alive. And for a brief moment, you actually feel proud. You did hard work today. Brutal, thankless, miserable work. But you didn't die. You didn't quit. You didn't get gored. Sure, your socks have permanently bonded with your feet, and you may never walk normally again. But you're surviving the Wild West one dung-splattered day at a time. As you drift off to sleep, you wonder what tomorrow will bring. Spoiler alert, it's worse. Morning comes like a slap. The tin bell rings again, louder this time, and it feels personal. Every bone in your body groans in protest. Your muscles ache in places you didn't know existed. Your palms are blistered, your shoulders throb, and your dreams, what little you managed, were filled with mooing. You manage to sit up, boots still on from the night before, and remember instantly that your boots are also full of sand. Great! It's like waking up with desert-flavored cereal between your toes. You stumble outside into the pale light of dawn. The ranch is already buzzing. A wagon is being loaded with sacks, crates, and a few terrified chickens. Red spots you and jerks a thumb toward it. "You're coming," he says. "Coming where?" "Supply run." You don't argue. Not because you're brave, but because the idea of not shoveling manure today feels like a win, even if it means a ride through bandit-infested territory. So you climb onto the wagon beside Clara, who's apparently volunteered to drive. Or maybe she drew the short straw. Either way, her expression reads somewhere between mildly amused and "if you touch anything, I'll bury you with the shovel." As the horses start to pull the wagon down the dusty trail, you bounce along the wooden seat, teeth rattling with every pothole. "Smooth ride," you joke. Clara raises an eyebrow. "This is smooth, right?" About an hour in, the sun clears the ridge and the heat punches you square in the chest. There's no escaping it. You try to angle your hat. It doesn't help. You try breathing through your shirt. That makes it worse. The West, it seems, wants you cooked from the inside out. But the scenery is stunning: huge mesas in the distance, cacti standing like sentinels, jackrabbits darting from shadow to shadow. It almost feels like a painting. A very uncomfortable, sweaty painting. As you jostle along, Clara points to a ridge in the distance. Used to be an old stagecoach line up there. Until the Apache raids got bad. Lost 3 drivers in a month. Then poof, rerouted. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Stagecoaches were the lifeblood of early Western travel, carrying passengers, mail, and gold. But they were also prime targets. Ambushes were common. Some companies even hired shotgun guards, hence the phrase "riding shotgun." Historians still argue whether the U.S. military's protection of stage routes was genuinely about civilian safety or just about securing gold shipments for eastern banks. Either way, folks on those dusty trails learned quickly that every bump in the road could be their last. Speaking of bumps, the wagon hits a rut so deep your backside leaves the seat entirely. You land hard, spine vibrating. Clara doesn't even blink. "Hold on better," she mutters. "Thanks, Clara." Around midday, you stop at a shallow creek to water the horses. It's barely a trickle, more like someone left a faucet running in the dirt, but it's water, and that's rare enough out here to count as treasure. While Clara tends the horses, you wander down the creek a few steps. You crouch, splash your face, and stare at the reflection of your absolutely wrecked self. You look like a character in a survival video game, somewhere between level 1 and tragic cutscene. Then you spot something shiny in the dirt. You dig it out, a small, twisted piece of metal. Maybe a belt buckle. Maybe a bullet casing. You're not sure. But it feels old, and it makes you wonder how many people passed through this exact spot. How many didn't make it? How many left pieces of themselves behind? Quirky tidbit? Some frontier folks believed creeks were cursed. Flowing water, they claimed, could carry spirits, and washing in it without an offering could invite bad luck. You hope that's just a bedtime story. You didn't bring any offerings? Unless your last granola bar counts. Back in the wagon, the journey resumes. The road, if you can call it that, is now more rocks than trail. One of the wheels wobbles suspiciously. Clara doesn't seem worried. You, however, are wondering if you'll survive another hour of this without losing a tooth. Then, just over a rise, you spot it. A cluster of buildings, a general store, a small saloon, a livery stable, and a few scattered homes. It's more of an outpost than a town, but to you it looks like a mirage. Civilization, sweet and dusty and slightly broken. You pull in and hop off the wagon, legs buckling slightly. Clara nods to the general store. "Grab the list. I'll check on the horses." Inside, the general store is cool and dim. Wooden shelves sag under the weight of canned goods, dried beans, bullets, bolts of fabric, and is that a jar of pickled eggs? You stare. It stares back. The shopkeeper, a grizzled man with thick glasses, eyes you curiously. "You with the ranch?" You nod. He hands you a folded piece of paper already prepared. Apparently, communication still works in this world, even if the plumbing doesn't. You load crates with flour, coffee, jerky, and soap finally. Then you linger by a barrel labeled candy sticks. You haven't seen sugar in days. You buy 2. One for you, one for Clara. She doesn't say thanks when you hand it to her. Just chews slowly, like it's the best thing she's tasted in a month. On the way out of town, the wind kicks up hard. Dust swirls around you. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbles. You look at Clara. Storm. Maybe just heat thunder. You squint at the horizon. Clouds are forming. Slowly. Heavily. The kind of clouds that don't just pass by, they do something. Like ruin your whole week. As the wagon rattles back toward the ranch, you brace for what's coming. The storm. The work. The endless grind of surviving a land that clearly doesn't want you here. But for now, you've got candy, company, and a seat on a wagon that hasn't collapsed yet. You're not thriving, but you're not dead, which, as always, is the bar out here. You make it back to the ranch just as the wind shifts from mildly sassy to vengeful banshee. The clouds have arrived for real this time, thick, dark, and brooding like they're holding a grudge. By the time the first drop hits your hat, Clara's already unhooking the horses with the speed of someone who's done this 1,000 times and isn't interested in dramatic flair. Red meets you halfway to the barn. "Storm's rollin' in," he says, helpfully confirming what your eyes, ears, and every nerve in your body already told you. "We've got to get the herd in." The herd. You want to protest, beg, offer money, candy sticks, anything to not go back out there. But you don't, because this is the West, and complaining earns you either mockery or silence. Possibly both. So, within minutes, you're back on horseback because of course you are, riding out with half the crew to round up the cattle before the storm hits. The sun has completely vanished behind a wall of clouds, and the air feels like it's been soaked in electricity. You remember watching those dramatic Western scenes. Cowboys thundering across the plains, hats low, spurs flashing, driving cattle in like bosses. Turns out, in real life, it's 90% shouting, 10% praying, and about 300% trying not to die. The herd is scattered across a large, open patch of land that seemed charming this morning. Now it's a battlefield. The cattle don't want to move. The wind's howling. Dust is everywhere. And there's a low, constant mooing sound that could be communication or panic or both. Red rides past you. Keep 'em together. Push 'em north. You have no idea which way is north. You pick a direction and hope for the best. Mainstream historical fact. Stampedes were the cowboy's nightmare. A sudden loud noise or flash of lightning could spook a herd into a chaotic run, trampling anything and anyone in the way. Entire cattle drives were lost that way, and more than a few cowboys too. So when the first crack of thunder hits like a gunshot, you instantly understand why Red looks so pale. "Move," he bellows. "We've got to get ahead of 'em." And just like that, it's happening. The herd breaks. They don't just run, they erupt. A flood of muscle, hooves, and pure terror, charging across the plain in one unstoppable surge. And you're somehow in the middle of it. You yell, wave your arms, try to steer your horse without steering your face into a cactus. You almost fall off twice. Once you drop your hat. You mourn it silently because going back for it would be suicide. The dust blinds you, the noise deafens you, and your horse, God bless this creature, is doing most of the actual survival work, dodging left and right while you cling to the saddle like a panic sock puppet. Historians still argue whether stampede management was more instinct or skill. Some say experienced cowboys had a feel for the herd, knowing how to swing out wide, form a flying V, and gradually slow the stampede into a circle. Others claim it was mostly luck, and surviving a stampede once didn't mean you'd survive the next. You're voting for luck, or a guardian angel with cowboy boots, because by some miracle, Red and the others managed to veer the cattle just enough. The herd swings left, slowing, bunching. Not calm, but not death incarnate either. You're panting, soaked in sweat, shaking. Clara rides up beside you, her hat tilted back, eyes narrowed. "You did okay," she says. "Define okay. You didn't die. Fair point. You helped drive the herd the rest of the way back. Slowly now, thankfully, toward the fenced pasture behind the barn. Lightning flickers again, closer this time, and just as the gate clangs shut behind the last cow, the skies open up. Rain. Not a drizzle. Not a sprinkle. A full-throated fire hose of the heavens deluge. You're instantly drenched, boots squelching, hat dripping, water running down your face in rivers. But it's also weirdly refreshing. For days, the West has been baking you alive, and now it's baptizing you in muddy redemption. Everyone runs for cover. The barn, the bunkhouse. You join the stampede, human this time, and dive inside just as thunder claps directly overhead, shaking the ground. The crew strips off wet jackets, stomps mud from boots, and starts up a fire. There's talk, laughter, stories. Someone pulls out a harmonica. You sit there, wrapped in a blanket that smells like wet hay, sipping lukewarm coffee, and for the first time, you feel like part of something. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some cowboys believed harmonicas could ward off evil spirits, especially during storms. Others just thought it drowned out the thunder. Either way, you're grateful for the tinny, wailing music curling through the air. It makes the storm seem smaller, less angry, more like a lullaby. And then Red tells the story. Back when I was riding in the Wyoming territory, he begins, I saw a bolt of lightning hit a steer right between the horns, dropped it flat, cooked it too, smelled like Sunday dinner for a second. Then awful. Someone groans. Clara rolls her eyes. Historians still argue whether lightning strikes were a real threat to open-range herds or just a tall tale told around campfires. You're leaning toward real threat because that lightning is very close. Eventually, the storm begins to pass. The wind softens. The thunder gets tired. The rain tapers into a steady drizzle. You head back to your bunk, trailing mud. Your body feels like it's been dropped down a canyon and reassembled with leftover parts. But your heart, weirdly full. You've rounded up cattle, survived a stampede, and avoided being barbecued by the sky. You still smell like the inside of a damp boot, but your confidence has grown just enough to almost not dread tomorrow. Almost. You climb under the scratchy blanket, listen to the rain on the roof, and sigh. You didn't run. You didn't fail. You survived the storm, and the West is starting to notice. By morning, the storm has wandered off, leaving behind a landscape soggy enough to swallow your boots whole. Everything smells like wet wood, trampled grass, and cow breath, which is surprisingly distinct in case you were wondering. Your muscles scream the moment you try to stand. There's a sharp ache in your thighs from the ride, your arms from waving like a scarecrow during the stampede, and your back from, well, existing in this century. But there's no time for groaning. Red's voice cuts through the mist. We've got fence line down. Grab a hammer. You want to ask, which fence line? Or even better, can I not? But your mouth just says, yes, sir, because apparently you're learning things, like obedience and despair. You stuff some jerky in your pocket, grab the tools Clara tosses at you. A hammer, pliers, and a coil of barbed wire that looks like it was designed by someone angry at hugs. And you're off. The fence line is way out near the edge of the grazing fields. You ride out with Clara and a grizzled cowboy named Otis, who hasn't spoken more than 6 words to you since your arrival. All of them variations on move, no, or not that one. The ride is slower today. The storm has left behind puddles that resemble miniature lakes, and every step your horse takes sounds like a toilet plunging itself. Once you reach the breach, the damage is obvious. About 20 feet of wire is sagging between the leaning posts, and a few of the cattle are starting to eye it like it's a suggestion, not a boundary. Clara squints at the mud. Could have been the wind, or a bull testing it. Otis spits. Or coyotes. Mainstream historical fact. Fence lines were a major part of frontier life, and keeping them intact was a daily battle. After barbed wire was patented in 1874, it transformed the West, effectively ending the open range and triggering range wars between ranchers and free grazers. Property lines became iron truths, enforced with pliers and, occasionally, pistols. Historians still argue whether barbed wire was more revolutionary than the 6-shooter. Some claim it tamed the West. Others argue it only redirected the violence, now fought over boundaries instead of bandits. You, however, are mostly just arguing with the barbed wire. Fixing fence turns out to be a deeply personal affair. You hold one post while Clara wraps new wire through the insulators. Otis drives replacement stakes with a mallet the size of your ego back when you thought this would be a vacation. Your hands are raw within minutes. Even with gloves, the wire finds your skin like it wants to know your blood type. You mutter something very PG-13. Careful, Clara warns. Wire bites back if you insult its mama. Noted. As you pull the wire taut, your entire body tenses. There's a moment where it feels like the wire might snap, and you imagine it lashing back and slicing your face like some Wild West horror movie. You brace. It holds. You let out a breath you've apparently been storing since breakfast. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some old-time ranchers believed singing while fixing fence helped keep the tension steady. Not emotional tension, though you could use help there. 2. Actual wire tension. They claimed the rhythm kept your hands calm and your pull even. Otis hums a tune as he works. You realize maybe he's one of them. The sun's climbing now, turning mud to steam and steam into stickiness. Every movement feels heavier. The wire hums in the heat, and your shirt is soaked through by noon. You take a break under a bent mesquite tree. Clara tosses you a canteen and a look. Still think cowboyins, just hats and horses? I never did. You lie. She smirks. Good. That myth gets people killed. You sip the water. Tastes like metal and dust, but it's cold, so you count it as a win. Then Otis stands. Couple buzzards circlin'. Something's down. He's right. You follow his squint to the far hill, where black shapes drift in lazy spirals above the scrub. You mount up, following him and Clara across the rise. The sun glints off something ahead. A cow, dead. Not one of yours, no brand. Just a lean, half-wild thing sprawled in the grass. Ribs high, eyes dull. Likely struck by lightning during the storm. Or something worse. Wolves? You ask. Could be, Clara says. But Otis is already off his horse, studying the carcass. No bite marks, no torn hide, just dead. And now, because the universe knows you love open questions, historians still argue whether unexplained livestock deaths, often blamed on lightning, disease, or predators, sometimes covered up early outbreaks of anthrax or even covert poisonings during disputes. There were whispers in many counties. Ranchers who found too many dead cattle tended to make enemies fast. You leave the cow. There's nothing to be done. And no sense in dragging mystery home with you. Back at the ranch, you finish the fence just before sundown. Your arms feel like cooked noodles. The gloves are torn. Your mood is somewhere between cautiously miserable and surprised pride. Clara claps your shoulder. You're not bad at this. Thanks, you say. I try not to bleed on the important parts. She laughs. It's rare, and a little terrifying. Dinner that night tastes better than usual, even if it's just beans and something pretending to be cornbread. Around the fire, people talk about horses, storms, ghosts on the prairie. Someone claims their uncle once found a buried strongbox full of silver coins out near Dry Creek. Otis grunts. Probably his uncle buried it in the first place. More laughter. And you? You sit quietly, letting the soreness settle in your body like a worn blanket. You're not strong yet, not skilled, but you're still here. And in the Wild West, that's more than most could say. Morning comes again, as it always does out here. Fast, rude, and a little judgmental. The sky's a sleepy blue, and your dreams have barely finished exiting your head when someone bangs on the bunkhouse door and mutters something about water and the spring. You stumble outside, still pulling on a boot, and discover today's exciting new adventure. Hauling water. See, the ranch's main supply isn't some shiny faucet with a handle. It's a spring, a few hundred yards downhill, nestled in a grove of cottonwoods and guarded by mosquitoes the size of pigeons. A windmill pump feeds the livestock troughs, but the crew? You're on your own, unless you want to share bathwater with cattle. Pro tip, you don't. Red gives you a pair of buckets and a look that says, "This is going to be amusing for me." Clara tosses you a wet bandana. For your neck, try not to faint like a flower. You accept it like a sash of shame. The trail to the spring is dry but uneven. Every step sends little clouds of dust puffing up around your boots, and the sun's barely risen before you're already sweating. Again, forever, eternally. Mainstream historical fact. Access to clean water was one of the biggest challenges in frontier life. Springs, creeks, and hand-dug wells were vital. So much so that entire settlements rose or fell depending on whether water was nearby or ran out. Wells could take weeks to dig by hand, and windmill pumps revolutionized things only after the backbreaking work of locating the water in the first place. You reach the spring and discover it's underwhelming. A shallow pool surrounded by reeds and buzzing flies, trickling from a crack in the rock like a leaky faucet. It looks more like something a rabbit would sip from than the life source of a ranch. but it's clear and it's cold. You fill both buckets, trying not to splash. They're heavy. You straighten, and the reality of what comes next hits you. The walk back. Carrying water across open ground in the West isn't just a chore. It's a whole sweaty, sloshy, upper body workout paired with foot-level acrobatics. Every step tilts the buckets. Every rock tries to twist your ankle. And the sun is now cheerfully roasting the top of your head like it's hosting a barbecue. You don't make it far before you need a break. You sit on a flat rock, breathe, and consider drinking both buckets just to save yourself the trip. That's when you notice a figure up on the ridge. Not Red, not Clara, someone else. Just standing, watching. You blink. They're gone. You shake it off, blame the heat. But the skin on your arms tightens all the same. Here's your quirky tidbit. Many ranchers believed certain springs were haunted, especially those that bubbled near ancient stone circles or had sulfurous smells. Stories floated about phantom riders appearing by moonlight or ghost cattle stampeding through the mist. The frontier wasn't just dangerous, it was weird. When you finally haul the buckets back, you're drenched, arms trembling, and walking like someone twice your age. Clara grins. Not bad for a city kid. Thanks, you pant. I think I lost 2 ribs. Red nods toward the barn. Good. You'll need less food. Everyone laughs. Except you. You're trying not to cry. Later, you help check the water troughs. The livestock need a constant source, and with the heat, that means climbing up to the windmill, checking valves, and clearing out gunk. You get the glamorous job of fishing out dead insects and one unfortunate frog. The windmill groans as it turns. Wood creaks. Metal groans. It's like listening to a haunted playground from 50 feet in the air. Historians still argue whether the introduction of wind-powered water pumps did more for the spread of settlement than railroads. Without them, homesteads couldn't survive the dry stretches between rivers. But some say they also accelerated the exhaustion of water tables, encouraging people to settle where water never should have been drawn. You tighten a bolt, wipe your brow, glance down. Clara's at the bottom, shielding her eyes from the sun. Don't fall, she calls. We already buried 1 rookie this year. You almost believe her. When you finally climb down, your legs are jelly, but the trough gurgles and fills. You feel a weird pulse of satisfaction. The cows immediately ruin the moment by wandering over and drinking noisily, one even sneezing into the water like a 6-year-old at a water fountain. Thanks, buddy, you mutter. As evening creeps in, a fire crackles behind the bunkhouse. Dinner's simple, corn mush and beans, but somehow still feels earned. Someone passes around a bottle of something sharp and probably illegal. You pass, remembering how easy it is to fall off horses and into fences sober. Otis starts in on one of his stories. Back in '85, I saw a horse walk straight across the Rio Grande, flat-footed. No boat, no nothing. That river was so low you could cross with dry boots. Historians still argue whether that ever actually happened, Clara says, smirking. Otis scowls. You saying I lie? I'm saying you stretch things like saltwater taffy. They laugh, and so do you, though your mind drifts back to that figure on the ridge. You don't say anything. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe not. You're starting to understand something about this land. It remembers. The trails remember every boot. The water remembers every hand. The windmill creaks with stories. And every shadow might just be more than it seems. By the time you crawl into your bunk, your muscles are fried, but your thoughts keep drifting back to the spring. And the way the cottonwoods didn't quite move in the breeze like they should have. And the fact that, in all the splashing and sweating, you never heard birdsong. You fall asleep listening to the distant hum of the windmill, wondering if tomorrow brings more ghosts, more chores, or just more buckets of heavy, back-breaking truth. You wake up to the sound of a chicken screaming. Okay, not screaming exactly, but there's no better word for the sound a panicked chicken makes when it's mid-kidnapping by a predator. It's a strangled honk of doom, feathers flapping, chaos flaring before breakfast. You lurch out of bed, boots half on, shirt inside out. By the time you reach the yard, Clara is already chasing after the noise with a shotgun, and Otis is muttering something about worthless guard dogs and reloading his coffee cup. The culprit? A lanky coyote just now disappearing into the brush with what used to be your best laying hen. You watch stunned as Clara fires a warning shot that echoes through the dawn like thunder on a skillet. You have officially witnessed your first livestock loss. Which means, congratulations, you're about to learn just how many things want to eat everything you're trying to raise. Mainstream historical fact: livestock predators were one of the biggest daily concerns of ranchers in the Wild West. Coyotes, mountain lions, bobcats, and wolves made off with cattle, sheep, chickens, anything soft, warm, and edible. Ranchers often set traps, posted night guards, and ran predator hunts to try to thin the threat. Entire laws were written around bounties for dead predators, creating a whole mini-economy of hunting. You grab a broom and start collecting chicken feathers from the pen like it's some twisted Easter egg hunt. Clara glares into the hills. They'll be back. They always are. She hands you a bag of coffee and says, "We're on night patrol tonight. Sleep while you can." You don't, obviously. You spend most of the afternoon eyeing every rustling bush and jumping at the shadow of squirrels. Otis strings up some tin can alarms around the chicken coop and pens, primitive but effective. A single tug on the wire and the whole line rattles like a campfire symphony. Quirky tidbit: some frontier families used ghost dogs to protect their land, large, white, semi-feral dogs trained to roam at night and scare off threats. They were often crossbred mastiffs and Great Pyrenees, left to patrol without much human contact. Many claimed these dogs were half spirit, half myth, especially when they died defending livestock and were buried with more ceremony than their owners. You don't have a ghost dog. You have a pitchfork, a lantern, and a very noisy stomach. The sun dips behind the hills, casting long shadows across the scrub. The animals get nervous before you do. Horses snort. Cows shuffle close. Even the chickens cluck low like they're muttering prayers in poultry language. Otis stakes out the south end of the property, near the creek bed. Clara takes the barn roof. You're assigned to the hen house. Alone. You sit on a stool with a blanket over your legs and your ears tuned to the night. It's almost peaceful. For about 15 minutes. Then you hear it. Crunch. Soft. Deliberate. You freeze. Crunch. Again. You lift the lantern, heart-thudding, and shine it toward the tree-line. Two yellow eyes blink back. They blink sideways. You stare at the shape low to the ground, sleek, ears up. Coyote. You don't breathe. It steps forward, sniffing the air. Then something else moves. Behind it. Another one. You shout. Hey. They freeze, but just for a second. Then they scatter, melting back into the scrub. Your heart is in your throat, hammering like it's trying to bail out. You hear a tin can line rattle from Otis's side. A shot rings out. More rustling. Clara whistles from the barn. The entire ranch feels alive, shifting and bristling with energy. You hold the pitchfork tighter. Suddenly, sleep seems like a forgotten luxury. Historians still argue whether predator control in the West did more harm than good. Early efforts often led to imbalanced ecosystems. Killing off wolves allowed coyotes to surge, and taking out apex predators created rodent problems. But from the perspective of a single ranch trying to survive, ethics often lost to urgency. You spend most of the night wide-eyed, jumping at shadows. Every time the wind moves the brush, you flinch. At one point, a tumbleweed rolls past and you nearly stab it with your fork. You stop just in time, sparing the weed and your dignity. Just before dawn, the coyotes come again, this time on Otis's side. He fires once, hits nothing, but scares them off. No new losses, but the tension lingers like fog on your teeth. You gather around the morning fire with Clara and Otis, trading tired nods. No one talks much. Clara hands you a cold biscuit and says, "You didn't cry." That's step 1. Step 2. You'll find out when you lose something you named. Great. You check the chickens. All there, minus yesterday's casualty. One particularly grumpy hen pecks your boot and struts away like she defended the place herself. You stay alert the rest of the day, eyes scanning the ridgeline. You start to notice patterns, places where brush is thin, where prints gather, where birds don't land. It's like the land is telling stories in a language you're only just beginning to hear. Later that afternoon, you and Clara set up a makeshift trap, raw meat tied to a spring rig with a noose loop. She explains it casually like she's talking about baking cookies. You trap one, others remember. Smarter than folks give em credit for. And just like that, you're a participant in a low-grade war. Not good versus evil. Just survival versus survival. As the sun sets again, you feel different. Not stronger, exactly, but more aware. Of every step, every sound, every chicken you've come to irrationally care about. Tonight, you sleep with your boots by the bed and one hand on your lantern, just in case. Because out here, things don't go bump in the night. They stalk. The rooster doesn't crow so much as wheeze this morning. He's missing a few tail feathers and one of his eyes looks like it's considering early retirement. But he's alive, which after the last few nights feels like a small miracle. You stretch, bones cracking like a saddle in winter. There's grit in your ears and a mosquito bite the size of a silver dollar on your neck. You smell like wood smoke and fear. And yet, today's task somehow promises to be even worse. Red appears with a coil of rope and a look that says, "Guess what kind of idiot job you're doing next?" He drops the rope at your feet and jerks his thumb toward the hills. Time to learn how we handle strays. And just like that, you're off on your first cattle roundup. Mainstream historical fact, roundups were, and still are, a vital part of Western ranching. Twice a year, cowhands gather free-ranging cattle, often scattered across miles of rugged land. Branding, counting, treating injuries, and weaning calves all happen during this chaotic stretch of time. It's physically brutal, often dangerous, and historically romanticized to the point of myth. The truth? It's you, a horse, and a whole lot of angry beef. Clara helps saddle up a paint mare named Whiskey Jack. She's gentle, she says, until she isn't. Then she hands you a saddlebag filled with jerky, a canteen, and exactly one blister salve. You'll thank me later. You and a small crew ride out under a sky that somehow feels bigger than yesterday's. The hills roll with brown grass and scrub brush dotted with lowing shapes that are, presumably, cows. Somewhere out here are strays cattle that wandered too far from the herd. And it's your job to find them. You think back to movies. Cattle drives looked kind of leisurely. Men on horses, lots of hats, sunsets. No one ever mentions the flies. They swarm you like you owe them money. Your horse flicks her tail constantly. You try not to scream. The first stray is spotted near a stand of cottonwoods. You ride ahead, trying to gently steer it back toward the main group. It turns toward you, snorts, and bolts in the opposite direction. Whiskey Jack takes off after it, hooves thundering, dust flying. You're gripping the saddle horn like your life depends on it because, let's be honest, it does. This is where the rope comes in. Red gallops beside you and tosses his lasso with a casual flick of the wrist. It loops the calf's front legs and the animal stumbles to a halt, annoyed and embarrassed. You skid to a stop, nearly flying over the saddle. Red hands you the rope. Next one's yours. Oh no. Quirky tidbit, cowboys often sang to cattle during roundups, not for the cows, but for themselves. Songs helped calm the animals at night and kept cowhands awake and coordinated. Some songs were nonsense syllables, others were parodies of church hymns. One legendary tune involved a chorus about beans and flatulence that no one dared sing around the camp cook. By mid-morning, you've spotted 3 more strays and failed to rope any of them. Red sighs loudly. Clara offers to let you practice on a bush. You miss that too. But you do learn something, how to read the land. The way hoofprints change when a cow turns. How birds circling means something died and you better figure out what. How wind pushes scents and how quickly an animal can vanish if you ride with the breeze instead of against it. Historians still argue whether the open-range lifestyle was ever sustainable. Some say it worked until barbed wire arrived and ended the era of the free-grazing cowboy. Others claim it was always doomed: too much land, too few water sources, and too many people chasing too little profit. Either way, it created a short, gritty golden age that America never forgot. You stop for lunch beneath a rocky outcrop. Everyone shares dried beef, thick cheese, and stale biscuits. You swear the biscuits could double as masonry. Otis tells a story about the time a steer ran straight off a cliff, then casually adds took 2 weeks to stop laughing. And another week to drag the carcass out. Clara eyes the horizon. We're missing one. Should be a bull calf, black hide, crooked ear. Last seen near Devil's Draw. You blink. Devil's what now? She grins. Don't worry. It's probably named that because the rocks look spooky. Spoiler, the rocks look spooky. The place lives up to its name. Jagged cliffs, weird echo sounds, and a buzz in the air that makes your skin prickle. You and Clara ride in silence, scanning for movement. Your horse snorts, nervous. You spot the calf nestled under a ledge, panting in the heat. You nudge Whiskey Jack forward, rope in hand. It notices you, then bolts. And this time, you're ready. You kick forward, heart pounding, loop the rope, swing it once, twice, let go. It flies. It lands. You miss. Spectacularly. The rope snags a low branch, which springs back and slaps you directly across the face. Clara laughs so hard she nearly falls off her horse. Eventually, Red catches the calf. You try to hide your shame under your hat. You ride back at sunset with sore legs, chapped lips, and a mild concussion. But despite all that, you kind of don't hate it. The light turns golden, casting long shadows across the prairie. The cattle move like a slow river. The horses snort and blow, tired but steady. And something in your chest eases, just a little. Back at the ranch, you help herd the cattle into the corral. You take off your hat and wipe your brow. Red nods at you. Didn't fall off. Thanks. That's the only compliment you're getting. You head inside for dinner. The stew tastes like salt and salvation. Later, staring at the stars, you realize something strange. You feel useful. And out here? That's worth more than gold. You wake up to the distinct smell of burning coffee and the less distinct, but much more urgent, feeling of something crawling across your chest. You open your eyes slowly. It's still dark. Very dark. And the thing on your chest isn't in your imagination. It's a tarantula. A real one. The size of a teacup saucer. Just sitting there like it pays rent. You don't scream. You don't flail. You simply go still, whispering a silent prayer to whatever prairie deity handles 8-legged nightmares. Then, as gently as possible, you slide off the cot and let the spider thump softly to the ground like a horrible, hairy biscuit. Welcome to your first full-fledged insect invasion. Clara appears in the doorway holding a lantern and already dressed. They're out early this year, she says, entirely too calmly. Don't worry, they're mostly harmless. Mostly. She doesn't elaborate. You follow her out, boots barely tied, shirt unbuttoned, still mentally trying to scrub tarantula feet from your soul. Outside, it's pre-dawn and buzzing, literally. Crickets, beetles, mosquitoes, and a cicada that sounds like a broken fan belt are already warming up for the day. You suddenly realize the West isn't empty. It's teeming. Mainstream historical fact, the Wild West was host to a dazzling variety of insects and small critters, many of which became real threats. Locust swarms could darken the sky and devour crops in minutes. Bedbugs, lice, and fleas were an ever-present plague in bunkhouses and frontier homes. And black widow spiders and scorpions often nested in boots, outhouses, or bedding, making daily life a gamble with creepy crawlies. You and Clara head to the barn to start the morning feed. She hands you a pitchfork and nods toward the hay bales. Lift from the side. Scorpions love the undersides. You lift your first bale slowly. Nothing. The second? A small, angry scorpion scuttles out and flips its tail like it's ready to duel. You do the only sensible thing. You throw the pitchfork. Miss. Clara picks up the scorpion calmly with a stick and flicks it outside. You'll get used to them. Just don't sleep with your mouth open. You do not like this advice? The day unfolds in a haze of itchy skin and constant paranoia. Every itch might be a tick. Every brush against your leg is potentially a centipede the size of a Subway sandwich. And the wasps? Oh, they know you're new here. Red's trying to fix a fence post when he gets stung, right on the nose. He swears under his breath and spits, then keeps hammering like it's no big deal. You ask, shouldn't we? I don't know, do something? Yep, he says. Complaining usually helps. Quirky tidbit. In frontier times, people believed tobacco juice could cure insect stings. A chew, spit, and slap technique was common for everything from bee stings to spider bites. Another home remedy involved mixing crushed garlic with animal fat and smearing it over bug-bitten skin, aromatic if not effective. You're starting to see why everyone out here smells vaguely like jerky and regret. Later that afternoon, Clara asks you to clean the root cellar. Simple enough, right? Except that the cellar is more like a dungeon and currently home to a thriving colony of what you hope are just mice. As you descend, the temperature drops and the musty scent of old potatoes and dirt fills your nostrils. Then something flutters. Something winged. You shine your lantern and see two bright eyes blink back from the rafters. A bat. No, a bats. Plural. A whole cluster of tiny, upside-down Dracula impersonators. You bolt out of there fast enough to sprain a philosophy. Clara finds you on the ground, panting. She squints at the doorway. They're harmless. Good for keeping the mosquitoes down. You don't answer. You're too busy trying not to cry. Historians still argue whether the settlers' harsh living conditions toughened them or simply normalized a kind of ongoing misery. One school says the daily exposure to bites, bugs, and beasties made people more adaptable. Another claims it wore them down emotionally, contributing to high levels of depression and frontier madness. Either way, it's not exactly a spa retreat. By dusk, you've survived a scorpion standoff, a near-wasp ambush, and one humiliating encounter with a millipede in your boot. You're mentally fried and physically twitchy. Dinner is stew again, slightly crunchy, which you pray is just undercooked beans. Otis tries to make conversation. You ever eat crickets? You freeze, spoon halfway to your mouth. No. Huh. They taste like peanuts. Sorta. You put the spoon down. That night, you check your bedding 5 times. Clara gives you a small cloth bag filled with dried sage and salt. Old trick, she says. Supposed to keep the crawlers out. You clutch it like a teddy bear. You lie awake, listening. Every scratch against the wall. Every chirp, buzz, click. It all means something's out there. Or in here. But then, surprisingly, you fall asleep. Maybe it's exhaustion. Maybe it's the sage. Maybe you're just surrendering. You dream of beetles playing poker. You wake up the next morning with a line of ant bites across your ankle. And you don't scream. Progress. You dream of water. Cool, clear, endless water. A swimming pool. A cold soda. A running faucet. And then you wake up. Your tongue is dry as sandpaper, lips cracked, eyes sticky. The sun's just cresting the hills and already baking everything in sight. The jug on your nightstand is empty. You shake it. Not even a drop. Welcome to today's fresh horror, dehydration. You shuffle out into the yard, blinking like a mole, and find Otis already up and muttering near the well. "Pumps slow today," he says, smacking the side of the old iron mechanism like it owes him money. Could be a cracked pipe, or the water table's dropping again. You groan. "How do we get more?" He eyes you. "We dig, or we wait, or we ride 3 miles to the spring and haul it back like mules with hats." You are officially a mule with a hat. Mainstream historical fact. Water scarcity was a constant threat in the Old West. Wells had to be dug deep, often by hand, and were prone to drying up, especially during drought seasons. Springs and rivers were more reliable, but water rights became hotly contested. Entire towns withered away when water sources failed or were diverted. Settlers learned to conserve obsessively, recycling everything from dishwater to bathwater. Clara tosses you a pair of saddlebags and a pair of sunshaded goggles. "We're going to the spring. Bring your canteens." You ride out with a small crew. It's not far, but the heat makes it feel like you're riding into the sun itself. Every surface shimmers. The dust clings. Your horse's sweat smells like burnt hay and effort. Halfway there, you realize you forgot to eat breakfast. The dizziness kicks in around mile 2. Quirky tidbit. Cowboys sometimes carried cow chips, dried buffalo dung, not just for fires, but because they believed sniffing them helped with dehydration headaches. Didn't, but it did distract them from the pain, which out here is sometimes as good as medicine. You reach the spring by late morning. It's not a majestic waterfall. It's a trickle, slipping through stones like a nervous sneeze. But it's cold and it's clean. You fall to your knees and drink straight from the pool, splashing water on your face like a pilgrim at a holy site. "Not too fast," Clara warns. "You'll cramp and puke. Then we'll really make fun of you." You sip slower. You fill every canteen, jug, and spare boot. Then you rest in the shade of a pinyon tree, chewing jerky and wondering how something as simple as water became your most desperate craving. Historians still argue whether early Western settlements chose locations wisely in terms of water access. Some say the towns that survived did so because of careful mapping and river proximity. Others argue it was luck, pure and simple, that dozens of settlements gambled on rainfall and went bust when clouds never came. On the ride back, you notice something unsettling. Cattle bones near the trail, bleached white, picked clean. Clara notices your stare. Drought 2 years back, lost 30 head, and a horse. You blink. What happened to the horse? She shrugs. Didn't die of thirst. Broke its leg chasing water. You ride a little more carefully after that. Back at the ranch, Otis is still fiddling with the pump. You and Clara unload the jugs like you're delivering treasure. Every drop is precious now. Washing, optional. Drinking, top priority. You're tasked with water rationing. Each person gets half a gallon a day. The animals get more, but even that's tight. You find yourself measuring out sips like they're gold. Every spilled drop feels like a tragedy. And then the worst happens. The cow knocks over a full bucket. Everyone freezes. Otis curses under his breath. Clara closes her eyes. You stare at the ground like it just betrayed you. Puddle in the dirt. Gone in seconds. "You'll learn," Otis mutters. "To watch the buckets like you watch the fire, closely, and always from the upwind side." That night, there's a trickle of water for bathing. You sponge off with a damp rag and feel like royalty. You dream again of swimming pools and ice cream and soda fountains. You wake to the sound of thunder, but not the good kind. Dust storm. Clara's already shouting orders. Get the animals in. Cover the water barrels. You scramble into action. A wall of brown is racing across the plains like it's late for an appointment. You pull canvas over the barrels, tie the chicken coop doors shut, and dive into the barn just as the storm hits. Everything goes black. Wind howls. Sand bites. You cover your face with a bandana, breathing through your teeth. The dust is everywhere, in your ears, in your mouth, under your eyelids. It smells like dry fear. The storm passes in half an hour, but the cleanup takes days. The spring? Now a mud puddle. The pump? Still slow. You ration harder. Half the ranch walks around with cracked lips and bad moods. Yet somehow you're adapting. You drink slower. You listen when Clara talks about water rights and property lines. You stop wasting water rinsing your plate and just wipe it with bread. That bread tastes like dish soap, but no one complains. You're learning what settlers had to know. That out here, water isn't just survival, it's currency. You lie in bed that night with a canteen by your head, like a holy relic, and you fall asleep dreaming of rain. When the first drops hit the roof, you think it's a dream, a soft ticking, like someone scattering pebbles across the shingles. Then another, and another. You sit up, pause, then thunder. Then it really starts. Rain. You bolt outside like a kid on Christmas morning. The sky is cracked wide open and water, actual water, is falling in sheets. You spin in it, arms wide, soaking through in seconds. Red stands on the porch, coffee in hand, watching you like you're the town's appointed lunatic. You're gonna regret that in about 10 minutes, he says, raising an eyebrow. But enjoy it while it lasts. Clara comes out with a bucket, face turned to the sky. Get every jug, every tin, every cracked pot you can find. We're catching all of it. And just like that, your morning turns into a frantic, joyful scramble to harness the sky. Mainstream historical fact: for settlers and cowhands in the West, rain was more than a weather report. It was a celebration. Water collection methods included cisterns, rooftop gutters, and barrels strategically placed to gather runoff. Because groundwater could be unreliable or brackish, rain was sometimes the only source of fresh, drinkable water for weeks. You line up every container you can find: washtubs, coffee pots, even your hat. The roof's leaky slope turns into a crude aqueduct, and you're drenched to the bone, grinning like a fool. Clara watches you with a smirk. City folks really lose it when the sky gets generous. You don't even care. The air smells like dust and ozone and fresh beginnings. The horses stomp and shake their manes. The chickens look deeply confused. Otis just mumbles, "'Bout time," and sloshes off to check the fences. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stops. You check the barrels. Barely a few inches collected. Turns out, most of it ran straight off into the already bone-dry soil. The mood sours quickly. Clara sighs. Flash storm. Tease. Not a meal. The rain's already evaporating off the ground in curls of steam. Otis returns with bad news. Flooded the dry gulch. Took out the south fence. That means cattle might be wandering again. So your first full day of post-storm recovery begins, with mud up to your knees and fence wire in your hands. Historians still argue whether the early ranches were built in the right places. Some point out that valleys caught water better but also flooded. Others argue that high ground avoided floods but dried out too fast. There's still debate over whether settlers really understood the land or just endured it. You don't have time for debate. You're too busy stepping on a nail. You yelp, loudly. Red inspects the wound. Didn't go in deep. You'll live. But what about tetanus? You ask. Clara raises an eyebrow. You even know what that is? Quirky tidbit. On the frontier, wounds were often treated with whiskey and whatever herbs someone's grandmother had sworn by. Some folks believed in rubbing chewing tobacco into cuts. Others swore by hot cow dung poultices or boiled onion compresses. Whether they helped is questionable. You limp your way through fence repair. The slow, grueling work. The posts are waterlogged, the wires tangled like Christmas lights, and your gloves are too wet to be helpful. Still, the cattle must be kept in and the predators out. And the predators? They love this weather. You spot the tracks first. Large, clawed, and fresh. Red kneels beside them, frowning. Cougar, maybe. Or coyote pack. Is that normal? Nothing's normal out here. Later, Clara shows you how to hang tin cans along the fence wire to create an early warning system. If something bumps the line, you'll hear it. That night, you fall asleep to the sound of dripping eaves and the occasional clink of tin in the distance. You dream of a cougar wearing boots. In the morning, the mud is thick as peanut butter. Your boots make a horrible squelch with every step. You nearly lose one twice. Water sloshes in the corners of everything. The chicken coop is a soggy mess. You're assigned to clean it. You have never loathed poultry more than you do now. Then comes the smell. You assumed the West was all fresh air and sagebrush. But wet hay, wet leather, wet cow, it's like someone turned a barn into a soup. Clara sees your face and laughs. You'll miss this when it's 110 degrees next week and your lips crack like fireplace logs. The silver lining? The water barrels are half full now. Still not enough. Otis proposes a dry march, sending a wagon to a nearby ranch that still has a working well. Red size means dealing with Gil. You ask, what's wrong with Gil? Everyone groans in unison. Turns out, Gil's the local water hoarder. Always has extra, always sells high, and always wants something weird in trade. Last time it was a fiddle lesson. Clara winces. I still have calluses from that nonsense. So a trade is arranged. You'll head over with Otis and some cured meat, spare blankets, and a goat. You don't ask why a goat. You just help load the cart and practice your best. We're desperate but polite face. The road is long, muddy, and uphill. The wagon creaks. The goat complains constantly. You reach Gil's homestead by late afternoon. He's shirtless, wearing a hat shaped like a turkey, and playing banjo. Of course he is. He eyes the goat approvingly. Trade accepted. Just like that, you get 2 barrels of clear, cold, perfect water. And a side dish of anise. Because Gil gives you a wink and mutters, storm season starting. Better get tight with the hills. Whatever that means. You don't ask. You just ride back in silence, goatless but grateful. That night, you drink real water. Cold. Clean. You don't even mind that it tastes faintly of goat. You wake up to flies buzzing in your ears, a patch of dried goat spit on your sleeve, and a sky so wide and blue it almost feels fake. It's laundry day. Not glamorous, not exciting, but apparently entirely necessary. Clara shoves a pile of grimy shirts and stiff denim into your arms and points to the creek. Down there, soap's in the tin. Water's cold. Good luck. You don't argue. Mostly because you're not sure your voice would work this early in the morning. Mainstream historical fact. Washing clothes in the Wild West wasn't just a chore. It was a whole-day event. Before the invention of the hand-cranked wringer or proper washboards, people used rocks, sticks, and lye soap made from animal fat and wood ash. Water was hauled by hand, heated over fires, and reused until it resembled beef stew. Wash day often meant a full Monday lost to scrubbing, wringing, and praying the wind didn't carry off your drawers. The creek is barely flowing. You set up on the flattest rock you can find, unroll the laundry, and brace yourself. The first splash of icy water hits like a slap from an angry glacier. You yelp. Clara, who's nearby wringing out socks, doesn't even look up. Gets warmer if you pretend you're already numb. You lather a shirt with the hard, yellow soap. It smells faintly like mutton and regret, and start scrubbing against the stone. Your arms ache within minutes. Your knuckles are scraped raw by the time you're halfway through the pile. And by the time you rinse your second pair of pants, the soap is lost downstream. You chase it, slip, fall in up to your thighs. Your new nickname? Soapy. Red never lets you forget it. Quirky tidbit. Some frontier women got so tired of wash day that they invented communal wash circles, sort of like gossip sessions disguised as labor. They'd share water, soap, and stories while scrubbing away. Laundry became both a necessity and a rare social outlet. In some towns, wash-together Wednesdays were a real thing. You envy that, actually. Washing clothes alone is bleak. It's just you, the bugs, and your soaked underthings on display like sad flags. At one point, a pair of long johns escapes the drying line and floats downstream like it's trying to escape this life too. Clara retrieves it with a stick. That's your dignity floating away. Back at the ranch, you hang what's left on the fence. The wind picks up. A shirt slaps you in the face. Otis eyes your work. You didn't starch him. You blink. We have starch. No, but I like complaining. You stomp away. Historians still argue whether life on the frontier really hardened people or if they simply developed higher thresholds for discomfort. Some claim it built resilience. Others argue it just forced everyone into quiet misery with better poker faces. What's certain is that every small task, laundry, dishes, even brushing hair, was a miniature battle against time, weather, and sometimes wildlife. You nap through lunch, and when you wake up, it's time for dinner prep. Not eating, making. Today, you're on kitchen duty, which sounds pleasant until you meet the stove. The ranch kitchen is basically a metal box inside a wooden box. The cast iron oven radiates heat like a furnace, and there are no fans. Just one tiny window and a curtain that smells suspiciously like fried onions. You peel potatoes. You slice fatback. You stir beans until your arm cramps. You open a jar of pickles and discover it's actually spiced pig's feet. You close it again. Then the fire smokes. Then the smoke clogs the room. Then the stew boils over. You're coughing, sweating, and trying to explain why the biscuits are black on the bottom but raw on top. Clara walks in, doesn't say a word, just flips the tray, scrapes off the top layer of char, and hums while setting the table. She hands you a spoon. They'll eat it. If they complain, they'll cook tomorrow. Dinner is quiet, chewy, but quiet. The next morning, you get a reward for surviving 2 soul-destroying chores. A trip to town. Your heart leaps. Civilization. You get cleaned up, well, by frontier standards. Your shirt has only one hole and your boots mostly match. Red's driving the wagon. Clara's coming along for supplies. You're just excited to see buildings again. The ride is bumpy but full of anticipation. The landscape slowly shifts from scattered brush and cattle fences to dusty wagon ruts and hand-painted signs. And then, like a mirage, it appears. Town. Sort of. It's not the bustling frontier city you imagined. It's a row of wooden storefronts, a lopsided saloon, a blacksmith's forge that smells like hot horseshoes, and a general store with a squeaky porch. But to you, it's Vegas. Quirky town tidbit. Many western towns were more like business hubs, set up along cattle trails or rail stops, thriving for just a few years before vanishing. Some had a single sheriff, a single schoolroom, and 10 saloons. Others popped up around a single family that decided to start charging people for post office access and barn dancing. You get a lemon drop from a glass jar in the store. You consider marrying the clerk for it. Clara's buying flour, salt, and more soap. You offer to carry it back to the wagon and promptly drop half of it in the street. The sheriff, leaning against a post, eyes you lazily. New blood. You nod. Figured. You got the look of someone who fought a sock and lost. You nod again. A group of kids runs by. One of them hurls a tomato at a sign. Misses. Hits you. You go back to the wagon. Historians still argue whether frontier towns were truly dangerous, lawless outposts or if their reputation has been overblown by Hollywood. Some research points to relatively low crime rates, at least compared to eastern cities, while others suggest sheriffs were often symbolic, and justice was a mix of luck and who your friends were. On the ride home, you sit beside sacks of grain and think about how something as small as a storefront, a candy jar, or a tomato-throwing kid can change your mood. You miss the creek. You miss laundry even, almost. The morning wakes you with a squint and a sigh. The sun is already teasing the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple that make you feel small. Like you're just a speck in some wild masterpiece you barely understand. You grab your hat and head outside. The air smells dry like burnt grass and pine needles. Today, you're learning the fine art of branding. No, not the corporate logo kind. This is a literal, burning hot piece of iron pressed into cattle flesh. You're told it's a necessary evil to mark ownership in a land where fences are often suggestions, and rustlers are as common as tumbleweeds. Mainstream historical fact. Branding irons were heated in fires and used to mark cattle with unique symbols to indicate ownership. These brands were registered with local authorities to prevent theft, but disputes were common and sometimes violent. The brand's design and placement could even indicate the ranch or the owner's family. You approach the pen cautiously. The cattle are restless, lowing softly, eyes wide. Their breath steams in the cool morning air. Red hands you the iron, a simple U-shape with a squiggle in the middle. You glance at Clara, who just shrugs. Just hold it steady and don't burn yourself. Easier said than done. The iron is searing. It smells like burnt hair and regret. You wait for the moment when the cow side presses against the post. You press down. The cattle flinch. The smell of singed hair rises. You pull away, heart hammering. Otis claps you on the back. Not bad for your first. You didn't set yourself on fire either. Quirky tidbit. Some ranchers got creative with their brands, using letters, numbers, pictures of animals, or even little jokes like a lazy M or a snake in a boot. Some brands looked like tiny stick figures, while others resembled ancient runes. Historians still argue whether some brands were designed more to confuse rustlers or just to show off. You spend the next few hours wrestling cattle into the chute and branding them. Your arms ache, your hands are scratched, and you get an unexpected face full of cow breath. It's humbling. Later, Red tells you about the ghost brand. A brand so faint that it can't be seen easily, used by some ranchers to claim stolen cattle later. You shudder. The rest of the day is a blur of fence mending, feeding, and avoiding the occasional jab from an annoyed bovine. But just when you think you're getting the hang of it, a commotion breaks out near the far pasture. You run over. A calf is tangled in barbed wire, bleeding in panic. You rush in, heart pounding. Barbed wire is one of the West's most ruthless inventions. It's cheap, easy to install, and keeps cattle in or out. But it's also a hazard for both animals and humans. Mainstream historical fact. Barbed wire revolutionized ranching in the late 19th century, allowing huge plots to be fenced cheaply. However, it caused many injuries and deaths. Some settlers hated it, calling it devil's wire, especially since it disrupted the open-range tradition and migration of Native Americans and wildlife. You carefully cut the wire with your pocket knife, trying to soothe the calves' panicked cries. You manage to free it. Red claps your shoulder. Not bad for a tenderfoot, but the moment stays with you. The sharp wire, the scared animal, the mix of relief and guilt. That evening, you gather around the fire with Clara, Red, and Otis. The sky is black and full of stars. So many you feel like you could reach out and catch one. You share stories, jokes, and a little whiskey. You realize that despite everything mud, branding irons, barbed wire, and goat trades, there's a strange beauty in this rugged life. But don't get too cozy. Historians still argue whether the open range or fenced ranching was better for the West's ecology and economy. Some say fences saved cattle. Others claim they ruined wildlife migration and sparked violent range wars. And somewhere between the debates and the stars, you know you wouldn't last long out here. Not really. You're a visitor. And the Wild West, well, it has its own rules. You wake up to the smell of burnt coffee and something faintly metallic. Probably Red's attempt at breakfast. The kitchen's still a disaster zone from yesterday's baking experiment. But nobody seems to mind. Survival trumps decor. Today's task is simple, they say. Just ride the perimeter and check the fences. Clara explains, handing you a worn leather saddle and a wide-brimmed hat that smells like old campfires. Simple, huh? Mainstream historical fact. Ranch hands routinely patrolled miles of fencing on horseback to spot breaks, rustlers, or stray cattle. These daily rides were essential to maintaining the herd and the ranch's livelihood, often taking hours over rough terrain. You mount your horse, who promptly snorts in what feels like disapproval. You realize this isn't going to be a gentle horseback stroll. You're off. The horse lurches forward, hooves pounding dirt and gravel. The wind hits your face hard enough to sting. You grip the reins like your life depends on it, because it just might. As you follow the fence line, you notice the signs of a recent storm. Fallen branches, patches of mud, and a few loose wires swaying in the breeze. You stop to fix a sagging fence post, wrestling with stubborn tools and thorny brush. The sun climbs higher, baking your neck and shoulders. Quirky tidbit. Some cowboys claimed their horses could smell rustlers or predators miles away, while others believed their mounts were just as ornery as the men themselves. There are legends about horses that would refuse to cross certain haunted stretches of land, though historians still debate whether this was superstition or actual animal behavior. You come across a small herd of cattle munching on sparse grass, calm and oblivious to your presence. You breathe out. The rhythm of riding, the fresh air, and the wide-open landscape start to dull the edges of your earlier worries. That is, until the horse suddenly spooks. You barely keep your balance as it bucks and rears. Your heart slams in your chest. You manage to calm the beast, murmuring awkward apologies. Red's voice echoes in your head. Never trust a horse that doesn't respect you. You spend the afternoon checking fences, adjusting wires, and marking spots for repairs. Each tiny break is a threat. One loose post means one escape artist cow wandering off, and one lost cow could mean hundreds of dollars gone. You notice a set of fresh hoof prints that aren't from your herd. Rustlers? Or just wild horses? You're not sure. The mystery lingers. That night, as you tend the fire, Red tells stories of cattle drives where rustlers ambushed wagons, of shootouts under the blazing sun, and of close calls with angry bulls. You listen, half enthralled, half terrified. Historians still argue how much danger cowhands really face daily versus the mythic legends Hollywood created. Some say gunfights were rare, while others claim violence was a constant shadow over the West. You tuck yourself into your bedroll, muscles aching but heart pounding with a new kind of respect for the wild. You probably wouldn't survive a day, but for now, you'll dream of open plains, restless horses, and fences that never quite hold. You're jolted awake by the shrill cry of a coyote somewhere near the edge of the property. It's the kind of sound that sets your nerves jangling, like an alarm you didn't ask for but can't ignore. Today, you're learning about the wild side of the West, the predators that roam just beyond the ranch fences, and why they're not exactly your friends. You step outside to a crisp morning that smells faintly of sagebrush and pine resin. The ground crunches underfoot, and somewhere in the distance, a raven caws. Mainstream historical fact: predators like wolves, coyotes, mountain lions, and bears were common in the Wild West and posed serious threats to livestock and sometimes humans. Ranchers often spent significant time hunting or trapping these animals to protect their herds, sparking ongoing conflicts between settlers and wildlife. You're handed a rifle, not because you're about to go hunting, but so you understand what it feels like to carry one. The cold metal feels heavy in your hands, and you try not to flinch every time it clicks. Red tells you about the ongoing war on predators. Ranchers versus nature itself. Traps, poison, and relentless hunting have thinned predator populations, but none are fully gone. Quirky tidbit. Some early settlers believed that coyote howls were the spirits of lost souls, or that mountain lions could shapeshift into humans. These superstitions colored the way people reacted to predators, adding a spooky layer to already tense encounters. You walk the edge of the property, eyes peeled for tracks or signs of nocturnal visitors. The ground reveals faint paw prints, claw marks on a tree, and tufts of fur snagged on a fence wire. You shudder. Later, Clara tells you a story about a neighbor's calf stolen by a mountain lion, dragged off in the dead of night without a sound. You can't help picturing it. Your mind races as the sun dips lower. The thought that something unseen is stalking the ranch feels less like a legend and more like a warning. Historians still argue how much predators truly threaten human settlements versus being scapegoats for ranchers losing livestock. Some evidence shows predators mainly went after weak or sick animals, while others claim widespread predation decimated herds. You settle by the fire, the rifle resting nearby, heart still thumping from the raw edges of the wild. You realize that out here, survival is as much about respecting nature's power as it is about taming it. And as the stars blink to life, you know that the night belongs not just to you, but to the shadows, the howls, and the hunters. You pull your blanket tighter. Maybe, just maybe, you'll last the night. You're barely awake when the knock comes, more of a boot thump on the wooden door than a proper knock, really. Red's voice, gruff and hoarse from sleep. Town meeting. Let's go. Town meeting? You blink against the sunlight and fumble into your boots, still half tangled in your bedroll. The last time you went to town, you got hit with a tomato. The bar is low for improvement. You climb into the wagon with Clara and Otis. The road is dusty, the horses ornery, and the air smells like sun-warmed manure and tension. As you roll into town, it's clear something's up. People are gathered in the square, shirts rolled to the elbows, brows furrowed, rifles slung casually over shoulders. There's a nervous energy like everyone's waiting for a fight no one wants to start. Mainstream historical fact, town meetings in the Wild West were often informal but serious affairs. With law enforcement sparse and distant, communities often governed themselves through collective decisions, sometimes fair, sometimes frighteningly swift. These meetings covered everything from livestock disputes to outlaw sightings and occasionally impromptu justice. You follow Clara through the crowd and catch snippets of conversation. More cattle gone, third one this week. Tracks near the river. Human ones. Rustlers. Your stomach turns. You remember those fresh hoof prints from your perimeter ride. Did you miss something? A man stands on a crate near the general store, Mayor Linton, apparently, though he looks more like a blacksmith who found a hat and got tired of other people's nonsense. We need riders to scout the North Trail. Armed. Clara steps forward without hesitation. You glance at her. You coming? She asks. You nod even though your insides scream no. Quirky tidbit. Some frontier towns used mock trials to handle serious accusations, but when tempers ran high, the line between justice and vengeance blurred fast. In some infamous cases, towns held public votes on whether a man was guilty, jury by popularity, basically. The mayor hands out directions and you ride with a small group out of town. Red leads, rifle slung across his back, and your own horse seems equally anxious. The trail winds along a dry creek bed. You scan every shadow, every scrub bush, every oddly shaped rock. A flash of movement up ahead. Otis raises a hand. You all stop. There near the riverbank, hoofprints. Several. Not cattle. Boots. Red dismounts and crouches, inspecting the ground like a seasoned tracker in a spaghetti western. They camped here, he mutters. Recently. You find a burnt-out fire pit and some bits of jerky wrapper, modern trash in an old world. The rustlers are real. Historians still argue whether rustling was a common threat or an overblown myth used to justify local militias and cowboy posses. What's certain is that accusations of cattle theft sparked some of the West's bloodiest feuds. As you return to town, the group is tense. You've confirmed it, someone's been on the land, watching, waiting. The mayor calls for a patrol schedule. Volunteers only. Clara signs up. Otis too. Then all eyes fall on you. You hesitate. Then nod. You've been here long enough to know this isn't just playtime. The Wild West doesn't give out participation trophies. You're either part of the solution or part of the problem. That night, you polish the rifle and stare at the sky. Stars burn like cold fire overhead. You think of those rustlers out there in the dark, somewhere beyond the horizon. You whisper to yourself, please don't let them be good at their job. Because you're still pretending you're brave. The patrol schedule kicks off before the sun dares to rise. You're paired with Otis, which is good news if only because he talks so much it keeps your nerves from spiraling into the void. You ride out in silence at first, hooves clicking on hard-packed earth until the sky starts shifting from black to bruised lavender. You're heading north again toward the rustler's last known site. Otis hums tunelessly and then, without warning, starts a monologue about how his aunt once used a rattlesnake as a doorstop because it was already dead and she liked the look of it. You don't ask follow-up questions. Mainstream historical fact, patrols were common on ranches and frontier towns, especially during times of cattle theft or conflict with nearby groups. These patrols often doubled as informal militias, enforcing vigilante justice in regions with no strong legal presence. Riders were expected to respond quickly and shoot if necessary. You ride past dry riverbeds and twisting rock formations that look like they belong in a fever dream. Up ahead, you both spot something strange, a glint of metal between two mesquite bushes. You dismount cautiously. A rusted rifle. Abandoned, leaning against a rock. There are boot prints in the dust around it and a torn bit of cloth snagged on a thorn. Otis crouches beside it, running his finger along the barrel. Left in a hurry, he murmurs. You scan the area and feel the prickle of being watched. Suddenly, your horse lets out a whinny and jerks sideways. Your pulse spikes. No sound. No movement. But something or someone has been here recently. You mount up fast. Otis does too. Let's report it. No sense playing cowboy hero today. You ride back faster than you left, the desert wind cold against your neck. Quirky tidbit, some rustlers were so bold they'd carve notches into their saddles for every stolen cow. Others, like the infamous Laughing Jack, would leave behind calling cards, playing cards, or scraps of poetry to taunt ranchers and trackers alike. Historians still argue whether these outlaws were brilliant criminals or just desperate drifters with a flair for drama. Back in town, Clara and Red listen closely as you describe the scene. Red's face goes tight. They're getting sloppy. That's either a mistake or bait. You don't like either option. That night, Mayor Linton calls another meeting. Talk of organizing a posse fills the room, murmurs, arguments, the clinking of gunmetal against tabletops. You glance at Clara, whose hand rests calmly on the table, eyes watching everyone. You wonder if she's scared or just that good at hiding it. Historians still debate the effectiveness of posses in the Old West. While they sometimes stopped crime, they also stirred violence, targeting innocents or escalating minor conflicts into deadly feuds. The term posse carried both authority and threat depending on which side you were on. You're not asked to join the posse. Not yet, but Red gives you a different job. You're staying here. Night watch on the southern fence. You nod, but your stomach drops. Being alone? At night? You walk the line with a lantern swinging from your hand. Every gust of wind sounds like footsteps. Every creak of a tree makes you jump. At one point, you're sure you hear breathing behind you, but when you spin, it's only silence and the distant hoot of an owl. Hours crawl by. Then, just before dawn, you see it far off on a distant ridge. A lone rider. Still. Watching. By the time you blink, they're gone. You don't sleep. You don't even sit down. The West is big. And quiet. And not your friend. You thought the dust and cattle were the problem. Turns out, the real danger might be the people lurking in the distance. Watching. Waiting. You've now reached the point where blinking feels risky. After last night's sighting, real or imagined, you're jumpy as a jackrabbit in a thunderstorm. Your hands still tremble slightly from the weight of holding that lantern through the dark. Even the sunrise doesn't bring relief. Just clearer shadows. Clara hands you coffee thicker than axle grease. Drink it. You look haunted, she says with zero sarcasm, which is somehow worse. You gulp it down. Today's task? Something deceptively simple again. Check the river traps. Apparently, even in the middle of potential rustler attacks, someone's got to make sure the homestead still eats. Mainstream historical fact. Many frontier families relied heavily on wild-caught food, including fish, rabbits, and waterfowl. River traps, primitive cages, or weirs made of wood and netting were common tools, often checked daily to ensure a fresh supply of protein when hunting was either impractical or illegal under tribal agreements. You follow the river trail on foot this time. It twists through scrubby cottonwoods and willows, the sound of the shallow current both soothing and suspicious. You feel like every stick crack might signal a trap or worse, someone watching. The first trap is empty, save for a chunk of what might have been a fish, now half devoured by scavengers. The second trap has something. Catfish, writhing and unimpressed with your city kid hesitation. You try to grab it barehanded. Bad idea. Your shriek echoes across the canyon as the thing slaps your wrist and escapes into the water. Clara, who's been trailing behind, tries not to laugh. Tries. Fails. Good catch, she deadpants. Quirky tidbit. Some frontiersmen believed catfish could predict the weather, acting erratic before storms. Others swore that river spirits guarded certain pools, refusing to give up their fish unless properly spoken to. One settler even wrote in his journal about singing to his traps. Historians still argue whether these rituals were sincere or the result of extreme boredom. At the third trap, you both freeze. It's been sabotaged. Rope cut clean. The net shredded with muddy boot prints nearby. Definitely human. You both crouch low, scanning the trees. Clara leans in. This wasn't a raccoon. You follow the prints up the bank, your breath coming quicker. Just beyond the reeds, you find something worse than a broken trap. A small campfire, still warm, and a carved symbol etched into a rock. It's a cattle brand, but not one you've seen before. Clara mutters something you don't quite catch. What? She looks at you with narrowed eyes. That's Jessup's mark. The name means nothing to you, but from her tone, you know it should. Turns out, Jessup's gang is infamous in these parts. Mostly for rustling, sometimes for murder. Supposedly disbanded years ago after a brutal shootout with territorial marshals. But clearly, someone didn't get the memo. You hike back fast, paranoia crackling like dry twigs underfoot. Back at the ranch, Red inspects the brand. He frowns. They're not just watching, they're probing. Historians still debate how structured criminal gangs were in the Wild West. Some say they functioned like traveling mafias with strict codes. Others suggest they were just loose bands of desperate men who happened to ride together out of necessity. Either way, you're not dealing with amateurs. Night falls again, heavy and quiet. You volunteer for the watch shift again. Maybe to prove something. Maybe because now you don't trust anyone else to do it. As you stand under the stars, you keep your hand on your holster and your ears sharp. Every crack of grass is a warning. Every breeze a potential whisper. You don't spot the rider again, but you know they're out there. You know they'll come closer, because the Wild West has rules, and the first one is this: if you're not hunting, you're being hunted. You wake up to the sound of shouting. It's not panicked exactly, but it's the kind of shouting that means business. You roll out of your blanket and hit the dirt running. Outside the bunkhouse, Red and Otis are by the corral, gesturing wildly at something just beyond the ridge. Smoke. A thin column rising into the sky. Wrong direction, wrong time of day. That's not a campfire. That's the Thornton place, Otis says grimly. You've never met the Thorntons, but from the way everyone moves, you know this isn't a social call. Within minutes, Red's forming a group. He looks at you. You're coming. Stay near Clara. Your stomach sinks. Again, you nod. You mount up, rifle awkward across your lap, and follow the group down the ridge toward the rising smoke. The trail is strangely quiet. Even the birds seem to have fled. When you crest the last hill, the scene hits you like a kick to the chest. The Thornton Ranch is still standing, barely. The barn has collapsed into a smoldering mess. The house bears black scorch marks. Livestock scattered. Fences down. But no bodies. No one. Clara rides forward, hand on her revolver. Mainstream historical fact. Ranch raids weren't uncommon during the most lawless decades of the West. Outlaws, rival ranchers, and even displaced groups would hit isolated properties. Sometimes for supplies, sometimes as revenge. Without regular patrols or central law enforcement, victims were often left to fend for themselves. Red and Otis start checking the perimeter while you and Clara approach the main house. Inside, it's eerily clean. No blood. No signs of struggle, just abandoned. A single plate sits on the kitchen table with half-eaten cornbread. Quirky tidbit. Some superstitious settlers believed abandoned houses were cursed, haunted not by ghosts, but by desert spirits who waited for homes to be emptied so they could reclaim them. Stories circulated about whole families vanishing overnight, leaving behind warm meals and unlocked doors. Were they stolen? Or did they flee something they couldn't name? Outside, Otis finds something in the dirt. Tracks multiple horses, at least 5 riders, and a wheel trail something like a cart or a small wagon. Could be they were taken, Red says, or fled. You're not sure which sounds worse. Historians still argue whether some disappearances were actually peaceful migrations, families heading back east or toward California, or the result of raids that left no witnesses. Either way, the West had a habit of swallowing people whole, erasing them like chalk off a slate. You find a torn photograph near the well, sepia-toned faces frozen in happier times. It feels wrong. Somehow, holding someone's memory in your shaking hands while their home smolders. Clara nudges you. We can't stay here. Back at the ranch, the mood shifts. You can feel it, tight in everyone's shoulders. This isn't about property anymore. It's about presence. Whoever's out there wants to be seen, wants you to know they can come and go as they please. Red gathers the ranch hands and volunteers. The plan is clear. Reinforce the fences, double the night watch, prepare for an attack. Because the next move, it might be yours, but it might not be. You're given a job, stand lookout from the grain silo. It's the highest point on the property, a good place to see, also a good place to be seen. You climb up, heart thudding, rifle slung awkwardly across your back. From up here, the West looks like it always has, endless, golden, cruel. But now it feels closer, more alive. You scan the horizon, lips dry. At sunset, you see movement again. Same ridge, same silhouette, still watching. You wonder, are they planning something? Or just waiting for you to break? The sun disappears, and the desert sighs into shadow. This time, you don't blink. You just stare back. Because in the Wild West, the rules are simple. Don't turn your back. Don't trust the quiet. And never, ever be the first to look away. The morning after the Thornton fire, things get real quiet. Not the peaceful kind, this is the waiting kind. The kind of silence where even the birds seem to be holding their breath. Red calls it the belly of the storm. You just call it unbearable. Nobody talks much. Even Otis, usually a one-man radio station, stays tight-lipped. Everyone sharpens tools that don't need sharpening. Clara lays out extra ammunition on the table like she's setting the world's most terrifying dinner service. Your job today? Repair the south fence. The one you checked back in Section 5. The one that gave you splinters, a sore back, and your first taste of how unforgiving this land really is. Except now, there's the added tension of knowing someone's been near it. Someone bold enough to sabotage your fish traps and torch a nearby homestead. You take a shovel, nails, and more courage than you actually feel, and head down with a small crew. No one jokes. No one dawdles. Mainstream historical fact: fence maintenance was crucial during the ranching boom of the late 1800s. Before barbed wire became widespread, ranches used split rail fences or stacked rocks. Labor-intensive and vulnerable to weather, rustlers, or wild animals. A broken fence wasn't just an annoyance. It was an open invitation. As you walk the fence line, you notice new breaks. Clean ones. Not storm damage. Not erosion. Deliberate. Otis squints at one. Cut low. Smart. Cattled walk right through without noticing. This time, you feel more than watched. You feel measured. Like someone's testing how far they can push. You keep moving. Halfway down the fence line, you spot something wedged between two planks. A scrap of red cloth. Tied deliberately, you pluck it out. A message? A warning? You show it to Clara, who mutters, "Jessup." Again that name. Who is Jessup, really? You ask. She hesitates. Quirky tidbit. One legend claims Jessup once robbed a train without boarding it, derailing it with stolen dynamite and waiting for the contents to scatter before collecting what he wanted. Others say he was a myth altogether, a stitched-together bogeyman used to scare off rivals and rile up lawmen. Historians still argue whether Jessup was a real outlaw or a collective alias used by multiple gangs. You never saw his face, Clara finally says. But his work? You knew it. You replace fence posts with hands that keep trembling. Clara watches your back. Feels like your last layer of safety. By the time the fence is patched, the sun's dipping low again. The desert's starting to glow that uncanny bronze gold it gets before slipping into night. You all mount up and ride back, faster than usual. Back at the ranch, Red's waiting. He's posted maps on the barn wall, sketches of the property, marked with red XS and new lines. "We're not just waiting anymore," he says. "We're baiting." The plan's bold. Set a decoy wagon along the old mining road. The kind rustlers couldn't resist. Inside, empty crates, decoy supplies, and 3 armed volunteers hidden beneath a canvas tarp. You guess who one of those volunteers ends up being. You. Historians still debate whether bait tactics were wise or foolish. Some frontier accounts tell of successful ambushes using decoy cattle or supply carts, while others recount brutal counterattacks. The line between clever and catastrophically naive was razor thin. That night, you climb into the decoy wagon beside Clara and Otis. The canvas goes down. It's pitch black, cramped, and smells like gun oil and old sweat. You wait, and wait, and wait. Every creak of wood sounds like footsteps. Every breath feels like it echoes. Suddenly, movement outside. A scuff of boots. A whisper you can't quite catch. Clara grips your arm. Your heart's pounding like a stampede in your throat. Then nothing. No gunfire. No shouting. Just retreating steps. They sniffed it out. Or maybe they just want you to know. They're on to you, too. You emerge into the night, eyes straining. The wagon sits untouched. but a rock's been placed neatly in the dirt beside it. Another sign, another taunt. The message is clear. They could have taken it. They didn't. Yet, after the failed decoy attempt, tension wraps itself around the ranch like a dust storm refusing to blow through. Every door creaks louder. Every floorboard seems to sigh in warning. Nobody says it, but you all know it's coming. You try to keep your hands busy. Clean your rifle. Then rec-lean it. Count bullets. Lose count. Start over. Clara walks by and drops a strip of jerky in your lap. Doesn't say anything. Just keeps walking. Today's task? Reinforce the water tower. Seems random, but water is life out here. If the rustlers poison or destroy it, the ranch might as well pack up and head east. You and Otis climb the creaky ladder with buckets of tar and spare planks. It's hot, high, and terrifying, especially with the wind picking up. Mainstream historical fact: water towers were essential in the West, especially on isolated ranches and near rail lines. Not just for livestock, but for survival. In some feuds, poisoning or destroying a rival's water source was the most effective and most brutal strategy. You sit on the edge of the platform, tar brush in hand, heart pounding more from the height than the threat of gunfire. Otis tries to lighten the mood. You know, he says, "My uncle used to store moonshine in a tower just like this. Said the altitude gave it more kick." You glance at him. Did it work? He shrugs. He went blind. Quirky tidbit. Some settlers believed lightning strikes could bless water towers, turning the water inside into healing tonic. One town even held a festival under their holy tank, claiming it cured warts and rheumatism. Historians still argue whether such beliefs were born of desperation, folklore, or bad whiskey. You finish your repairs just before a sudden gust nearly knocks you sideways. Otis grabs your collar and yanks you down hard. You laugh, but only after you're back on the ground. Later that evening, Red calls another meeting. This time, it's not about preparations. It's about confrontation. He's got a scout report. Jessup's crew is camped in Black Vulture Gulch, about 6 miles north. Isolated, rocky, hard to reach, perfect for an ambush. The plan? Preemptive strike. You hit them before they hit you. Everyone in the room goes still. Even Clara flinches. Red looks around. We ride out at dawn. You try to swallow, but your throat's dry. You never expected to go on the offensive. Defensive? Sure. Hiding? Definitely. But now, you're heading toward the danger. Historians still debate whether vigilante raids helped or hurt frontier justice. In many towns, they blurred the line between lawmen and outlaws. Some turned into outright massacres. Others were hailed as acts of righteous defense. Either way, once you crossed that line, there was no coming back. That night, Clara sits beside you by the fire, silently cleaning her revolver. "You don't have to go," she says after a long while. You stare at the flames. "Wouldn't feel right staying." She nods once. No more words needed. You sleep fitfully. Dreams of red cloth and vanishing farmhouses, of horses screaming in the dark, of Jessup's name whispered like a curse. Dawn breaks too bright, too soon. You're given extra ammo. A bandolier that smells like old leather and fear. Clara hands you a scarf to tie over your mouth. Not for fashion, for dust. Or maybe anonymity. You ride out with 8 others. Hooves thundering across the earth. The gulch looms ahead like a scar in the land. Narrow entrance. Tall cliffs. It swallows you in shadow as soon as you step inside. You dismount at red signal. Weapons out. Footsteps quiet. You move forward, nerves fraying with every inch. Then you hear it. Voices, laughter, and music. A harmonica, playing something cheerful and completely at odds with the rising tension in your chest. You round the final bend and find the camp, but no sentries, no guards, just 6 bedrolls. Empty. The fire's still warm. A harmonica sitting on a stump. You spin, heart lurching. They're gone. No, they're already behind you. A shot rings out loud, close. Someone screams. Chaos erupts. Red yells, "Take cover!" You dive behind a boulder, dust exploding around you as bullets zing past. They knew you were coming. They were waiting. And now you're in their trap. Gunfire tears through the gulch like a thunderclap, echoing off the canyon walls so fast you can't tell where the shots are coming from. It's like the rocks themselves are armed. You press your back against a boulder, breathing like you just ran a marathon. Clara's crouched beside you, face grim, her revolver drawn. Otis isn't in sight. You peek around the rock, bad move. A bullet clips the stone near your head with a shriek that sounds way too much like your own name being shouted from the dark. This is it. This is what people mean when they talk about the Wild West turning into hell in an instant. Not saloon duels. Not showdown theatrics. Just dust, chaos, and lead-slicing air. Mainstream historical fact. In real shootouts of the American West, most gunfights lasted only a few seconds and took place at close range, often within 10 feet. Unlike the duels of dime novels, they were messy, loud, and fast, and almost always ended in panic rather than clean victory. Red's voice yells from somewhere to your left, "Pull back! Fall back!" You and Clara scramble, crawling more than running, boots sliding in gravel. A round whizzes so close it tugs your scarf. You swear your ears ring from more than just the sound. You find Otis lying behind a rock, clutching his leg. "Go!" he groans. "Don't slow down." Clara ignores him, grabs his other arm. You grab the rifle he dropped. Together, you drag him back out of the kill zone. Somewhere behind you, a horse screams. You make it to the entrance of the gulch. Somehow, the ambush was textbook. They knew the terrain. They knew you. Maybe someone tipped them off. Or maybe Jessup's just that good. Quirky tidbit. One outlaw gang once staged an ambush using stolen Union Army bugles, mimicking cavalry signals to throw off their targets. Their plan worked until they accidentally called a real nearby patrol into the fight. Historians still argue whether that double ambush was pure luck or the worst coordination in frontier history. You regroup under the cover of a dry creek bed. 3 are missing. 1 is dead. Otis can't walk. Red stares at the ground, jaw clenched. "They wanted us to come," he finally says. "This wasn't about the wagon. This is territory now." Clara spits into the dirt. "They want the ranch." Red nods. "And if we don't stand, they'll just take it." That night, back at the homestead, the mood is grim. No one eats. No one even builds a proper fire. You sit outside the bunkhouse staring at the stars. Same sky. Same universe. But everything below it has shifted. Clara joins you again. She doesn't say anything at first, just leans back against the wall, hat tipped over her eyes. Then, "You still think you'd survive the Wild West?" You almost laugh. "Almost? Nope." She grins without looking at you. "That's the first smart thing you've said since you got here." Historians still debate whether outlaws like Jessup were driven by necessity or by thrill. Some were ex-soldiers with no place to go. Others were orphans raised by crime. And then there were those who simply enjoyed the freedom, the lawlessness of it all. Whatever Jessup is, one thing's clear, he's not done. Because when the next day comes, you find another sign. A cattle skull, hung on your front gate, marked with the same red cloth. This time, nobody laughs. Red walks up to it, cuts it down without a word, and tosses it to the ground. "We ride again," he says. "But this time, we don't go to them." You blink. "Then what's the plan?" He looks at you serious, like you've just been deputized. "We bring them to us." Your stomach flips. Again. There's going to be a final fight. You can feel it. And somehow, against every ounce of your better judgment, you're going to be right in the middle of it. At dawn, the ranch becomes a war zone in waiting. Red's strategy is simple and insane. Fortify the ranch. Lure Jessup in. Turn the familiar terrain into a trap. Beat them on your ground, not theirs. You hammer nails until your fingers go numb. Clara strings wire through the mesquite trees like she's weaving a web. Otis, legs still busted, sits on the porch with a rifle balanced across his lap like an old mountain god daring anyone to try him. You're digging trenches where flower beds used to be. You stack crates near the barn, not for supplies cover. The horses are moved into the root cellar. Every window is shuttered. Doors are braced. Water barrels are filled. Ammunition is counted twice, then 3 times. It's not just survival anymore. It's defiance. Mainstream historical fact, some frontier towns and ranches fortified themselves during times of attack by building dugouts, hollowing hillsides, or creating makeshift barricades from furniture and wagons. These defenses were rarely permanent. Most settlements couldn't afford full-time protection, but in desperate moments, even a farmhouse could become a fortress. Red draws a line in the dust with the heel of his boot. Past here, he says, we hold nothing back. You've never seen him look this tired. Or this ready. That afternoon, Clara hands you a locket. Keep it in your pocket, she says. You open it. Inside? A curl of baby blonde hair and a tiny ink drawing of a baby's face. She doesn't say anything else. Just walks away. You close the locket gently and slide it deep into your coat. The waiting begins. Sun creeps lower. Shadows stretch. And then you hear it. Hooves. Many of them. The thunder of a dozen riders cresting the ridge. Black silhouettes against a blood-orange sky. Every outlaw fantasy you've ever read about just showed up, kicking up dust and vengeance. Quirky tidbit, some outlaws wore charms, animal teeth, or even tiny sacks of rattlesnake rattle around their necks for luck in battle. Others believed in wearing stolen boots from a killed enemy to steal their stride. Historians still argue whether these were deeply rooted superstitions or psychological warfare. You crouch behind the feed shed, rifle tucked to your shoulder, breath loud in your ears. They ride closer. No banners. No warning shots. Just grim faces and steady pace. Until, red fires first. A crack like thunder, and suddenly the world explodes. Gunfire rips across the front of the ranch. With splinters. Horses scream. Riders scatter into a V-shaped formation, returning fire with military precision. You shoot blind at first, too panicked to aim. But then you find your breath. Steady your grip. You remember the feel of recoil. The rhythm of reload. Clara's beside the barn, firing from a window. Otis is still posted like a statue on the porch, sharpshooting like he's got a debt to settle with every bullet. Red moves like a general. Yells orders. Keeps people moving. Keeps you from unraveling. You hit one rider. You're almost sure. He drops from his horse, disappears in the dust. They try to flank. Red anticipated it. Boom, dynamite buried under a false rock blows two of them off their feet. One doesn't get up. Another rushes the back wall. You're there. He's got a hatchet. You've got a rifle. You fire. Miss. He swings. You duck. He crashes into a barrel. You don't think. Just grab the shovel next to you and whack, bring it down. He stops moving. You're not sure if he's dead. You don't stop to check. Historians still debate whether civilians on frontier ranches received combat training or just learned by fire. Some homesteaders were former soldiers, others self-taught marksmen. Either way, battle often blurred the lines between rancher, outlaw, and militia. The fight rages for what feels like hours but might be 20 minutes. Then a whistle. Shrill. Specific. Jessup? The outlaws retreat like a wave pulling back to sea. 2 horses gone. 3 men on the ground. You don't chase. Nobody does. You wait. Dust settles. Silence returns. But it's not peace. It's aftermath. Otis is bleeding, but alive. Clara's got a graze on her arm. Red lost his hat and nearly his life when a bullet tore through the barn beside his head. And you? You're shaking. Not just your hands. All of you. Because you've survived something people romanticize in movies. But there's nothing romantic about the smell of burnt powder and blood. Nothing glamorous about splinters in your ribs and someone else's breath hitching in their final moments. You walk the perimeter. Step over bodies. One of them just a boy. Maybe 17. Another's wearing a necklace made of copper coins and bone. You bend down and pick up a scrap of red cloth from the fence post. The same mark as always. But this time it's frayed. Torn. Almost panicked. Jessup wasn't expecting a fight like that. And he knows now, you're not just surviving anymore. You're fighting back. Word count, 1,086. The next morning comes quiet. Too quiet. No wind. No birdsong. No hoofbeats on the horizon. Just the burnt smell of gunpowder lingering in the dirt and the heavy silence of everyone pretending they're okay. You wake on the porch, back against a post, rifle still in your lap. A blanket you don't remember pulling over yourself rests on your shoulders. Probably Clara's doing. Or Otis. You don't ask. Red gathers everyone by the barn. It's not a speech, he's not that kind of man. Just a few words. We did what we had to, he says. Jessup's cruel think twice. And that's it. Everyone disperses. Back to work. Back to mending fences, burying the dead, counting the livestock that's left. You're not quite sure what to do. The adrenaline is gone. Now there's just a big hollow space in your chest where the fear used to be. Mainstream historical fact, after major confrontations, life in the Wild West didn't pause for grief. Death was a part of it. Burials were often same-day affairs with wooden crosses and hastily dug graves. There were no counselors. No getting over it. You kept moving or the West moved on without you. You find Clara near the corral feeding the remaining horses. She doesn't look up when you approach. You want your locket back? You ask. She shakes her head. No. You keep it. You nod. Quietly tuck it deeper into your pocket. Otis is already telling stories about the gunfight, adding spice and swagger to what was basically 10 minutes of sheer chaos. According to him, he took down 3 men from the porch with 1 bullet ricocheting off a dinner bell. Clara rolls her eyes. Red tells you the rustlers are gone. For now. But Jessup's not finished. He's smart, Red says. He'll wait until we relax. But something in his tone is different now. He's not scared anymore. Neither are you. Quirky tidbit. After some notorious Wild West shootouts, survivors would carve tally marks into fence posts or brand barn doors as a reminder of what had happened there. Some ranches even left outlaw boots nailed upside down to gates. A quiet warning to any who might challenge them next. Historians still argue whether these rituals were acts of pride or attempts to keep ghosts at bay. That night, the fire is bigger, the food hotter. Someone even laughs. Real, honest laughter. For the first time in days, you sit next to Clara, who shares a biscuit and actually smiles. Otis is telling another version of the story. He's up to 5 outlaws now, plus a bear that somehow got involved. You let him have it, because for the first time, you don't feel like an outsider. You feel like someone who's made it through something impossible. You feel like family. And just as you lean back, eyes closing to the pop of the fire and the sound of boots scraping porch boards, you think, maybe, just maybe, you could survive the Wild West. But only because you're not doing it alone. Now the stars stretch wide above you, endless and familiar. The ranch has settled into the kind of silence that doesn't feel threatening anymore. Just soft, slow, and full of earned rest. The wind carries the faintest scent of sage and smoke, brushing across your cheek like a whispered lullaby. Your boots are off. Your shoulders ache in that good, heavy way that says you've done enough for one lifetime. Somewhere, a coyote calls out, but it's distant, harmless. The kind of sound you'll sleep through now instead of waking up startled. You remember the locket in your coat pocket. You don't pull it out, you don't need to. Its weight is comforting. A reminder of the people who fought beside you. Of the firelight in Clara's eyes, of Otis's wild stories, of Red's quiet strength, of who you became, because it wasn't the gun that made you survive. It was everything else. The grit, the trust, the strange laughter in the middle of danger. The meals shared when there wasn't much to go around. The calm in the middle of a dust storm. The knowledge that even if the West tries to chew you up again, you've got something it can't touch anymore. Place, purpose, family. You sigh, long and slow, letting your heartbeat match the rhythm of the wind and the ticking of cooling tin. The Wild West didn't break you, but it sure tried. Now all that's left is sleep, and dreams, of horses running free, of starlight on the prairie, of peace earned the hard way. So drift off now, slow and steady. You've earned it, cowboy.